Hey there, welcome to a cozy crime story. Tonight, we are diving into 3 hours of gripping true crime, real stories of mysteries, betrayal, and cold-blooded crime, all set against the soothing backdrop of rain. It's the perfect blend of calm and unsettling. If these cases draw you in, tap that like button, share with your fellow true crime lovers, and subscribe to join our curious community. I'm always wondering, where are you tuning in from? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. Now, settle in, and let's dig into the darkness. The bus hissed to a stop, like it was exhaling after a long confession. Rowan stepped off with a nervous smile tugging at his lips, clutching a small gift box in one hand, the daisy pendant she said she'd always dreamed of wearing someday. His heart raced with that uncertain excitement that only love could bring. Fragile, hopeful, foolish. He had counted down the days, 5 hours on the road, a playlist of her favorite songs keeping him company, and now, finally, he stood in her town, Maplewood, a place that looked as ordinary as his expectations were extraordinary. His phone buzzed, a message from Marielle. "I'm waiting near the park fountain. You'll see me first, I'm sure." He smiled at the words, replaying her voice in his mind. That soft, almost musical way she spoke when they video chatted, though she had always avoided showing her full face. Bad camera, bad lighting, she used to say. He never pushed her to turn it on fully. Love didn't need proof, he'd thought. The air was cool, the kind that carried distant laughter and the faint scent of rain. He adjusted his jacket, eyes scanning the fountain ahead. A figure stood there, a young woman, holding a red umbrella even though the sky was clear. He felt his breath hitch. This was the moment that had lived rent-free in his heart for months. But as he stepped closer, his smile faltered. Her movements, the way she swayed, her gaze slightly unfocused. Something about it felt unexpected. The woman turned. Their eyes met. Rowan froze. The air around him thinned. His fingers loosened around the gift box until it almost slipped. The face before him wasn't what he had built in his imagination, not the filtered photos or perfectly lit angles she'd once sent. Her smile was genuine, wide, filled with warmth, but her features, her expressions revealed the truth. Marielle had Down syndrome, and in that moment, 5 hours of hope turned into 5 seconds of disbelief. He didn't step back. He didn't move forward either. He simply stood there, his heart unsure whether to ache or to understand. She waved shyly, her voice trembling but sweet. "Rowan, you came." The world around him seemed to quiet, the sound of cars, the chatter of strangers, all fading into a silence that held only confusion, kindness, and something he couldn't yet name. Rowan's pulse pounded in his ears as he tried to steady his breathing. Marielle stood a few feet away, sunlight catching on the umbrella she still held like a child clinging to comfort. Her smile was gentle, open, untouched by the guardedness most people wore when meeting someone new. She looked nothing like the person in the photos. The pictures she had sent him, the soft filters, the shadowed corners, had hidden everything she now revealed so honestly. Her voice, though, was unmistakable. That same melodic tone he'd fallen asleep to on late-night calls. "Hi," she said again, stepping closer, the red umbrella dipping slightly in her hand. "You're taller than I thought." Rowan swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "And you're real." It was all he could manage. His voice cracked halfway between disbelief and compassion. He wanted to say something kind, something human, but his mind was caught between two truths, the girl he thought he loved and the woman standing before him. For months, their messages had been filled with promises. She told him about her favorite books, her dream of learning to paint, her fear of thunderstorms. She said he made her feel seen, and he believed her, believed every word because he needed to. Now as he looked at her, a strange guilt began to creep in, not for being lied to, but for realizing how fragile his understanding of love really was. Marielle noticed the silence. Her smile wavered just enough for him to see the worry behind it. "You don't like surprises, do you?" she said softly, her eyes lowering to the ground. "It's not that," Rowan said quickly, stepping closer. "I just didn't expect—" He stopped himself. There was no right way to finish that sentence. She nodded, as though she already knew. "It's okay, most people don't." Something inside him cracked a little, not in anger, but in empathy. He could see she wasn't trying to deceive him out of cruelty. Maybe she just wanted to be loved without being judged first. He looked down at the gift in his hand, the daisy pendant she'd said would make her feel normal. He pressed it into her palm gently. "It's for you," he said. Her eyes brightened, and for the first time since he arrived, she laughed, a sound pure and unfiltered. "You remembered." He smiled faintly, but inside, the ground beneath him was shifting. Have you ever loved someone you never truly knew until it was too late? That question lingered in his mind, quiet and heavy, because at that moment, Rowan realized love could be both beautiful and cruel, depending on what it's built upon. Rowan followed Marielle into a small cafe just off the main road, the same one they had planned to visit for weeks. It was quiet, the kind of place where laughter lingered in the air and the smell of vanilla mixed with the sound of soft music. She chose a corner table, humming under her breath as she traced shapes on the wooden surface with her fingertip. Rowan sat across from her, trying to make sense of everything swirling in his chest. The woman he had imagined was confident, mysterious, almost unreachable. The one sitting across from him was tender, unguarded, and entirely real. Her smile wasn't polished, it was sincere. Her laughter didn't hide insecurity, it revealed innocence, yet he couldn't silence the voice inside that whispered, "She hid this from you." He watched her stir her hot chocolate, her hands trembling slightly. "You're quiet," she said. "Are you disappointed?" The question hit him like a weight. He hesitated, then exhaled. "I'm surprised," he admitted. "I wish you'd told me sooner." "I was afraid you wouldn't come," she replied. Her words were soft, fragile, like something that might break if he raised his voice. "I didn't want you to think I was different. I wanted you to know me first." For a moment he couldn't speak. There was something painfully human about that confession. Who hadn't wanted to be seen for their heart before their flaws? He looked into her eyes, bright, trusting, and completely open, and guilt twisted in his stomach. "I don't care about different," he said, but his tone betrayed uncertainty. She smiled faintly, as if sensing the storm behind his calm face. "You're kind," she whispered, "even when you don't know what to say." They sat there for hours, talking, laughing, avoiding what couldn't be fixed. She told him about her art, her favorite memories, and how people often judged her before they ever listened. He told her about his small apartment, his job at the repair shop, his quiet life filled with noise from screens but no real connection. Somewhere between the laughter and pauses, something unexpected happened. He began to care again, not out of pity but out of understanding. Love, he thought, wasn't about perfection or pretending. It was about presence, even when the truth hurt. Still, every time she reached across the table to touch his hand, he froze for a fraction of a second too long. Every time she looked at him with affection, he smiled just a little too late. Compassion and confusion wrestled inside him, and neither side was winning. As the sun dipped lower, Marielle looked up and said, "You're still here." "I said I'd stay," he replied quietly. "But you're thinking about leaving," she said, her eyes steady. "I can feel it." Her honesty stunned him. He didn't deny it, because she was right. In that moment, Rowan learned something about truth. It doesn't need to shout to be heard. Sometimes it whispers in the silence between two people trying to love each other despite the distance that truth creates. Night settled over the small town like a heavy coat. Rowan walked Marielle back to her home, his mind caught between admiration and unease. The air smelled of rain, the streets dim under soft street lights. She kept talking, her words flowing with excitement about seeing him again, but his thoughts were elsewhere, tangled, uneasy. Inside her home, a modest single-story house with hand-painted walls and a shelf full of clay figurines, Marielle's world came alive. Every corner carried a piece of her heart. She offered him tea, her face glowing with pride as she showed him her art, small drawings of smiling faces, families holding hands, couples beneath wide skies. He smiled politely, but something in his expression betrayed distance. His thoughts were slipping into places even he didn't want to visit. Marielle noticed. You don't like it here? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. No, it's not that, Rowan replied, forcing a smile. It's just different from what I imagined. She tilted her head, confusion crossing her features. Different how? He hesitated. I just thought you were someone else. The words hung between them like a fragile thread ready to snap. Marielle's eyes softened with hurt. But I am the person you talk to every night. I'm still me. Rowan swallowed hard. You should have told me sooner, Marielle. I wasn't ready for this. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she looked down at her hands. I thought if you knew you'd never come. I wanted you to see that I could love too. Her honesty cut through him. He knew she wasn't trying to deceive him out of cruelty. She'd acted from hope, yet that didn't make the shock easier to bear. He tried to change the subject, to keep the moment from breaking. You're really talented, he said, gesturing to her artwork. These are beautiful. Her smile returned, faint but genuine. They make me happy. I draw people I love and places I wish to go. Rowan nodded. That's good. You should keep doing that. But his tone was distant again, and she heard it. Silence filled the space, long, uncomfortable, and heavy. For the first time that night, Marielle didn't try to fill it with words. She simply stood there, her hands clasped, eyes lowered, as if bracing for something she couldn't quite name. Rowan rubbed the back of his neck, unsure of what to say. I think I should get going, he muttered. Will I see you again? She asked, her voice small, fragile. He paused at the door, guilt tearing at him. I don't know, he admitted. The look that crossed her face at that moment would follow him for days, sadness mixed with quiet acceptance. Okay, she whispered. Thank you for coming, Rowan. As he stepped outside, the rain began to fall, slow, steady, relentless. He walked back to his car, his shoes soaking his heart heavy. The drive home felt endless. The windshield wipers beat in rhythm with his thoughts, each swipe erasing a little more of the warmth he'd felt that morning. How could something that started with hope end in so much confusion? He wanted to believe he'd done the right thing, that honesty was better than pretending. But deep down, he knew he'd left something precious behind. A woman who had loved him for who he was, not for what he looked like, earned or owned. The truth, though, was that Rowan wasn't angry at Marielle. He was angry at himself for being unable to love without conditions. He parked outside his apartment and sat there for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, rain tapping against the glass. His reflection stared back at him, tired, hollow, uncertain. Love had turned into something else, not hatred, not rejection, but a quiet ache that neither words nor apologies could fix. That night, Rowan didn't sleep. He replayed every message, every call, every promise exchanged, and every laugh that now felt distant. By dawn, something inside him had changed. He wasn't sure what it was yet, only that the story he'd started with hope was far from over. Days passed, but Rowan couldn't shake the image of Marielle's face the moment he walked out her door. Her eyes, wide, hurt, still hopeful, haunted him. It was the kind of look that stays with you, even when you wish it wouldn't. He told himself he needed space to think. But space turned into silence, and silence turned into something colder, absence. Marielle, on the other hand, kept sending him messages, not many, not desperate, just small notes filled with kindness. Made another drawing today. You'd like it. Do you still want to talk? He read them all, but rarely replied. Each word she wrote felt like a mirror reflecting his shame. At work, he became distracted. His friends noticed his distant stare, his half-hearted smiles. One evening, his CO worker Mara leaned over his desk and asked, You okay, Rowan? You've been off lately. He shrugged. Just tired. Needed a break from things. Mara tilted her head. That about the girl you went to meet? Rowan stiffened. Yeah, he said quietly. It didn't go how I thought it would. She nodded sympathetically. Sometimes what we expect isn't what we need. Her words stayed with him long after she walked away. That night, he found himself scrolling through old messages, back to when he and Marielle first met online. Her way of speaking had always been so full of warmth. She talked about sunsets, about how people should look for the good in each other. She made the world sound softer than it really was. He thought about calling her, just to explain. But every time he opened the messaging app, Guilt froze his fingers. What could he even say? I'm sorry for not seeing you as a person before anything else. It sounded hollow even in his mind. Meanwhile, Marielle waited. She spent her evenings drawing him, not the version who left, but the one she met in messages, the one who made her laugh and promised they'd see the ocean together someday. Her mother, Clara, noticed her mood changing. Sweetheart, are you sure he's worth all this sadness? She asked gently. Marielle looked up from her sketchbook. He was kind, Mama. Maybe he's just confused. Clara sighed. Confused men can do a lot of harm without meaning to. But Marielle's heart didn't understand caution. She believed in love the way some people believe in prayers. Quietly, faithfully. One rainy evening she decided to call him. Her voice trembled when he answered. He froze. The sound of her voice was softer than he remembered. Hey, Marielle, you didn't block me, she said, a faint smile in her tone. That's good. I wouldn't do that. Silence. Then, softly, I miss talking to you. He closed his eyes. I miss it too. For a moment it felt like old times. The laughter, the warmth, the way she could turn ordinary words into something tender. But then reality crept in again. Marielle, he said carefully, I need to be honest. I'm not sure I can be what you want. I never asked you to be anything, she replied. I just wanted to know if I still mattered to you. Her words hit him like a wave. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. Good night, Rowan, she whispered before ending the call. He sat there in silence, phone still pressed to his ear, heart pounding with something that felt like regret, or maybe loss. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Inside, guilt settled like dust. He had built a connection on trust and warmth, but now stood on the ruins of both. He didn't mean to hurt her, but sometimes the absence of kindness hurts more than cruelty ever could. The distance between them was no longer just miles. It was made of silence, hesitation, and everything left unsaid. Rowan couldn't sleep that night. Marielle's words echoed in his mind. I just wanted to know if I still mattered to you. He had no answer then, but the silence that followed felt heavier than anything he could have said. He lay awake until morning, staring at the ceiling, the weight of what he'd done, or failed to do, pressing down like invisible chains. For the first time in weeks, he saw himself clearly, not as a victim of shock or confusion, but as someone who ran from kindness because it frightened him. By sunrise, he decided he couldn't leave things as they were. He wrote her a message, not long, not perfect, but honest. I was scared, Marielle, not of you, but of what I didn't understand. I thought I was ready for love, but I wasn't ready for truth. You didn't deserve my silence. He hesitated before pressing send. Then, with one deep breath, he did. Hours passed with no response. He tried to distract himself, poured coffee, went for a walk, pretended to care about the world outside, but his thoughts kept circling back. Every time his phone buzzed, his heart jumped. Every time it wasn't her, disappointment followed like a shadow. That afternoon, the message came. Thank you for saying that. I forgive you, Rowan, but I'm learning to take care of my heart too. He read the words again and again. It wasn't bitterness, it was closure. She had found strength in his absence, and that both humbled and hurt him. He wanted to see her again, but this time not for himself, for her, to apologize properly. To let her know she wasn't a mistake in his story, she was the lesson he didn't know he needed. So he booked another trip, not impulsively but with purpose. He didn't tell anyone, not his friends, not his Kio workers. It felt like something sacred, a quiet atonement. When he arrived in her town again, the air felt different, softer, or maybe he was the one who'd changed. He walked up to her house, heart pounding, hands trembling slightly. Before he could knock, the door opened. Her mother stood there. Clara's expression hardened the moment she saw him. You shouldn't be here, she said. I just want to talk to her, please. She's not the same girl you left standing at that doorway, Rowan. She's stronger now, and she doesn't owe you anything. He nodded. I know, but I owe her something. There was a pause. Then, reluctantly, Clara stepped aside. 5 minutes, Marielle appeared from the living room, holding a sketchbook. She looked different, calmer, more assured. When she saw him, Her eyes widened, but she didn't rush toward him. "Hi," he said softly. "Hi," she replied, cautious but not cold. He took a small step closer. "I didn't come to make excuses. I came to say I'm sorry, really sorry. You didn't deserve my hesitation. You showed me more honesty than I was ready to face." Mariel studied him for a long moment. "I was hurt, Rowan. I felt like I wasn't enough." "I know," he said, his voice cracking. "But you are enough. You always were." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she smiled faintly. "You're late to realize that." He let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, I usually am." For a moment it was quiet, just two people standing in the echo of what might have been. Then Mariel handed him the sketchbook. "I drew something for you," she said. He opened it. Inside was a drawing of two figures standing under the same sky but facing different horizons. At the bottom, she'd written, "Sometimes love isn't about holding on. It's about learning when to let go." He looked up at her, eyes stinging. "You're incredible," he whispered. She smiled. "I know." There was no bitterness, only peace. The kind that comes from understanding, from surviving something that almost broke you. When he left her house, the world felt quieter, but lighter. He didn't know if they'd ever speak again, but he knew he'd never forget her. Mariel wasn't the girl from his online chats anymore. She was the woman who taught him what real compassion looked like, the kind that forgives but never forgets the lesson. And for Rowan, that was both redemption and consequence. The story of Rowan and Mariel wasn't one of perfect endings, it was one of awakening. Their paths crossed because of curiosity, but separated because of truth. Yet, somewhere in the middle of all the confusion, a deeper message lived, one that lingered long after their goodbyes. Rowan returned home with a quieter heart. He didn't post online about his trip. He didn't try to defend himself or paint a better version of the story. Instead, he learned to sit with discomfort, to face what his actions had revealed about him. That's where growth began. He realized that real love isn't about idealized perfection, it's about presence. It's about seeing someone completely, their laughter, their struggles, their difference, and choosing kindness anyway. Mariel had offered him that kind of love, even when he didn't deserve it. And though their story didn't end in romance, it left something far more valuable, awareness. In the end, he often replayed that moment, standing at her door, staring into eyes that carried innocence and courage all at once. That image stayed with him, not as regret, but as a reminder. Because in life, we all have a choice. Do we run from the things that challenge our comfort, or do we face them and allow them to change us? So, to everyone watching right now, let me ask you this. Have you ever judged someone before truly knowing their story? What if the person you dismissed was the one meant to teach you the most about love and humanity? This isn't just Rowan and Mariel's story. It's a reflection of how quickly people retreat when reality doesn't match imagination. It's about the courage to stay when things look different from what you expected. As you think about it, remember this simple truth. Compassion doesn't need perfection. It only needs sincerity. Now, before we continue to the next part of this story, where unexpected tragedy reshapes everything, take a moment to engage with us. If this story has already stirred something in you, hit that like button. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if you were Rowan? And don't forget to subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story, where every narrative holds a mystery, but every ending carries a moral. Because sometimes, the most shocking stories aren't about crime at all. They're about conscience. Rowan Venn had always been the kind of man who lived on the edges of things, never entirely inside the crowd, but never completely alone either. People knew him from work, from the local diner where he ate the same breakfast each morning, from the gym where he lifted quietly and left without small talk. Yet no one really knew him. His life looked full from the outside, steady job, clean apartment routine, but inside it was hollow. Most nights ended the same way, a muted apartment, a muted man, and a glowing screen. His phone became his closest companion. Text threads and scrolling timelines filled the space where laughter and touch used to live. It wasn't that he disliked people, he simply couldn't find the energy to reach out anymore. After a painful breakup 2 years earlier and a few half-hearted dates, he'd given up. That loneliness had a weight, not dramatic, not loud, but constant, like rain that never stopped falling. And the longer it lasted, the more Rowan's mind started craving connection in places that didn't require vulnerability face to face. One night, in a late-hour chat room for people who discussed books and music, he found her. Marielle. Her screen name was Mara Loon, a reference to the moon and its quiet pull on restless hearts. Her messages stood out. They weren't shallow greetings or flirty one-liners. She wrote like someone who felt things deeply. Her first message wasn't even directed at him. She'd shared a line from a poem. Some people meet in words before they meet in worlds. Rowan replied without thinking. Then maybe words are safer than the world. That single exchange was the match. From that night onward, messages passed between them like quiet confessions. Marielle spoke of art, of music that made her heart ache, of wanting to be seen not for perfection but for sincerity. Rowan found himself opening up too, telling her about his job at the auto shop, his mother's passing, the emptiness of his apartment. She didn't judge or rush him. Every response from her came with empathy that felt unfiltered, almost pure. There was something innocent about her tone, never manipulative, never forward, just kind, the sort of warmth that didn't feel performative. Rowan hadn't realized how starved he was for something genuine until her words started filling his nights. His phone stopped being a distraction and started being home. But what he didn't know, and what she never said, was that Marielle was hiding something. Not because she wanted to deceive him, but because she was afraid. A truth she feared would make him disappear before she could explain who she really was. Their first true conversation stretched from midnight until dawn. What began as a few lines about poetry turned into hours of typing, two lonely hearts finding rhythm through glowing text bubbles. Rowan hadn't talked that long to anyone in years. Marielle's words carried lightness, a soft curiosity that made him forget the world outside his screen. She asked about his childhood, the smell of motor oil that clung to his hands after work, and his favorite season. When he said autumn, she wrote back, "Maybe you love it because even endings can be beautiful." That line stayed with him long after the chat ended. Over the next few weeks, their conversations became routine. She'd message him every evening after dinner, and he'd reply almost immediately. They built a quiet ritual, shared playlists, late-night jokes, and stories of imaginary trips they wanted to take together. She'd send him pictures of sunsets from her window, always captioned with something wistful. "If you were here, you'd see how soft the sky looks tonight." Rowan's world began to change in small, invisible ways. He started leaving work early, just to check his messages. He smiled more. Even his CO workers noticed. "You seeing someone?" one of them teased. Rowan shrugged, hiding the truth because it felt fragile, something that might vanish if he spoke it aloud. The digital intimacy between them was slow and gentle, like water finding its shape around stone. Marielle was unlike anyone he'd met before. She didn't fill silence with empty chatter. She asked questions that made him think about meaning, kindness, fear. There was something almost childlike in her hopefulness. Once he'd mentioned how most people seem to lose that soft part of themselves, the ability to trust, and she replied, "Maybe the world takes it from some of us, but I think it's worth holding on to, even if it hurts." That sentence marked her in his heart. He didn't know why, but her innocence wasn't naive. It felt brave. After 3 months of talking daily, they began video calling. Marielle always had her camera tilted slightly down, never showing her full face. She'd laugh it off, saying her camera quality was bad, or she wasn't ready for him to see her properly yet. Rowan respected that. He didn't press. He told himself that love didn't need appearances, that her kindness was enough. But sometimes, in the pauses between their laughter, he'd feel something he couldn't name. A subtle hesitation in her voice, a momentary flicker of unease when he spoke about meeting in person. Still, he brushed it aside. Because for the first time in a long time, he felt alive, wanted, understood, seen. And in that quiet digital space, love began to bloom. Marielle had a way of speaking that softened even the hardest parts of Rowan's day. Her messages weren't just words. They felt like small pieces of calm in a life that had long forgotten gentleness. She'd send him short poems she wrote about the moon, about time, about the ache of waiting for someone you've never met, but somehow already miss. Her words weren't complex. They were simple, tender, and pure. "Do you ever notice," she once typed, "how quiet love feels before it speaks?" That message stayed in his mind for hours. Rowan found himself reading her poems during lunch breaks, scribbling them into the corners of his notebook like secret reminders that someone out there cared enough to write just for him. What he admired most about her was her innocence, not childishness, but an honest view of life untouched by cynicism. She believed people could change. She believed that kindness could still matter in a world that often rewarded cruelty. She spoke often about her small world, her love for simple things, feeding stray cats, baking bread that never seemed to rise evenly, collecting seashells, though she lived far from the coast. Rowan could hear the sincerity in her voice each time she described these tiny moments. Perfection isn't real, she once told him during a late-night call. That's why I like the cracks in things. They let the light through. He couldn't remember the last time anyone had said something that true to him. Her laughter was quiet, musical, a sound that carried innocence rather than mockery. She never made him feel lesser for his solitude or his past. Instead, she made him believe that maybe, just maybe, he still had something good left to give. When Rowan spoke about his disappointments, the job he never got, the relationship that ended without closure, the loneliness that had become habit, she listened. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to talk, but real listening, the kind that made silence feel safe. Maybe all the wrong people, she said softly once, were just teaching you how to love the right way. He didn't know what to say to that. He just sat there, staring at her pixelated face on his laptop screen, wishing she could see how much those words meant. As the weeks went by, Marielle's poetic optimism began shaping Rowan's outlook. He started taking evening walks again, paying attention to the things she often talked about, the rhythm of wind, the smell of wet soil after rain, the way light flickered through trees. It wasn't love that made him change. It was her way of seeing. Yet beneath her sunshine words, there were moments, fleeting pauses, when her tone shifted. Sometimes, when he'd say she was beautiful, she'd grow quiet. When he'd tell her how much he wanted to meet, she'd smile, but her eyes seemed distant, unsure. Still, he told himself that everyone had fears. He loved her enough to wait. And so, Rowan waited, for the day they'd finally stand face to face. It began with small gestures, good morning texts, sleepy voice notes, shared playlists. But over time, those gestures became lifelines. For both Rowan and Marielle, their connection wasn't just digital, it was emotional oxygen. Rowan would wake up each morning to her messages, lines that felt like warmth written in text. I dreamt we were walking by a lake. You held my hand, and I didn't want to wake up. He'd smile, save the message, and reread it throughout the day. It wasn't the kind of affection he'd ever had before. There was no judgment, no hidden motive. Just care, honest, open, consistent. At night, they'd listen to music together. Marielle loved songs with gentle piano chords and slow melodies. She said they made her feel like time could pause for a moment. Rowan, on the other hand, had always preferred silence, but now, that silence was filled with her voice humming softly through his phone. Sometimes, she'd sing to him, not perfectly, but with a sincerity that made every off-key note sound precious. He'd close his eyes, headphones in, imagining her somewhere across the state, sitting in her room, eyes closed too. Two people connected not by proximity, but by emotion. The more they shared, the deeper the dependency grew. Rowan stopped spending as much time with his few friends. He no longer felt the need to scroll aimlessly through social media. His focus was her thoughts, her laughter, her stories. She told him about her favorite book, a worn-out copy of The Little Prince. She said it made her believe that love wasn't about appearances, but understanding hearts. He hadn't read it before, but that night, he ordered it online. When it arrived, he highlighted every quote she'd ever mentioned. There was one passage she repeated often: "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye." That line became their secret code. Whenever they felt overwhelmed or afraid, they'd send each other a single emoji, an eye with a heart. It meant, "I see you," even when the world doesn't. But as the months went by, their closeness began to expose cracks neither wanted to admit. Marielle would sometimes disappear for days, no texts, no calls. Then she'd return with long apologies, saying she wasn't feeling well or that life had become a bit too loud. Rowan never pressed her for details. He wanted to be gentle, patient. but a part of him started to ache with worry. He began noticing inconsistencies, the way her camera was always turned off, the way she changed the subject whenever he asked to visit. Still, love makes excuses. He told himself that her hesitations were just fear of being hurt, fear of rejection, fear of imperfection. He understood that because he'd lived it too. So he waited again. Every night their calls ended the same way. One day she'd whisper, "You'll see me and you'll understand everything." He believed her. In those quiet hours, when his room glowed dimly from his laptop screen and her laughter filled the space between them, Rowan felt like he'd finally found what everyone spends their whole life searching for. Someone who made loneliness disappear. But what neither of them knew was that love built in shadows eventually demands the light. And when that light came, it would change everything. As their relationship deepened, Rowan began to notice something fragile behind Marielle's cheerful words. Her messages were still warm, still thoughtful, but lately there was a tone, a trembling hesitation that hadn't been there before. She started avoiding video calls entirely, offering soft excuses that sounded rehearsed. "My camera is broken. The lighting in my room is terrible. Maybe next week, when I feel more ready." Rowan tried to hide his disappointment, responding with patience and understanding. But at night, the doubt crept in quietly. How could someone who felt so open suddenly seem so hidden? There were moments, small and strange, that unsettled him. Once, during a voice call, he heard muffled laughter in the background, not hers, but someone else's. When he asked about it, she went silent, then quickly said, "It's just my cousin. Don't worry." Another time, her voice cracked mid-conversation, as if she were holding back tears. When he pressed gently, she ended the call. Days later, she returned with a long apology. "I'm sorry. I get scared sometimes. I don't want to lose what we have." Her words broke him a little, not because of what she said, but because of what she didn't. There was something she wasn't telling him, something heavy pressing against her honesty. Rowan wasn't an impulsive man. He didn't demand explanations or throw accusations, but each unanswered question lingered like fog. Her social media presence was almost non-existent. No photos, no tagged friends, no trace of her outside their private chats. He once asked if she'd ever send him a photo of herself. She laughed softly. "Soon. I just need to know you won't change when you see me." He chuckled, brushing it off. "You could have 3 eyes and green hair, and I'd still be here." She replied with a quiet, almost pleading tone. "You say that now." That night she didn't message him before bed. The next morning she sent a long text. "Rowan, have you ever cared for someone so much that you were afraid they'd stop if they saw the real you?" He read the message again and again. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but for once, words failed him. He didn't know what she meant, not fully, but the fear behind her message felt real. There were also moments when she seemed to test him, asking strange hypothetical questions. "If I wasn't who you thought I was, would you still love me? If people judged me, would you defend me?" He answered every one of them the same way, of course, and he meant it. At least he thought he did. The truth is, when love grows in secrecy, it also grows in illusion. Rowan had fallen for her voice, her kindness, her words, but he had no image of her beyond what she allowed him to imagine. That kind of love is fragile, built on hope, not reality, and Marielle knew that. She was terrified of what reality might do to the only person who had ever treated her like she mattered. One evening, her messages slowed to a stop again. Hours passed. Then, late into the night, a single message appeared. "I want to tell you something, but I don't know how." Rowan's heart raced. He replied instantly, "Whatever it is, you can tell me. I'm not going anywhere." No response came that night, or the next. But when she finally replied, 3 days later, she sent only one line. "Promise me you won't hate me when we finally meet." It was a question that should have comforted him, but it didn't. Instead, it felt like the calm before something he wasn't ready for, something that would test the very limits of love and truth. The days that followed were slow, almost heavy with tension neither could explain. Rowan felt it in the quiet hours after work, that strange pull towards someone he still hadn't seen. Marielle's presence had become a rhythm in his life, a daily pulse of warmth through his phone, and when she went silent, it was as if a light had gone out. Then one night, out of the blue, she messaged him again. "I think I'm ready." He stared at the words for a long time, barely breathing. "Ready for what?" he typed. "To meet you," she replied. For a second he didn't know what to feel, relief, excitement, or fear. But soon excitement took over. He imagined finally seeing her, hearing her laugh without the filter of static, holding her hand. He imagined everything except the truth she was carrying. Marielle's messages over the next few days had a strange tone. She was nervous, apologetic, yet hopeful. She asked odd questions that made him pause. "Will you promise not to walk away no matter what? Do you believe that love means seeing someone's heart first?" He reassured her every time, not knowing that she was holding on to those words like oxygen. Rowan's friends noticed his change. He was livelier, distracted, more invested in his phone than anything else. He told one coworker about her, the way she spoke, the way she made him feel grounded. They teased him a little. "You sure she's real?" one asked. He laughed it off. "She's real. She's just shy." Marielle, on her end, was facing a very different kind of anxiety. She had spent weeks preparing for this, rehearsing what to say, imagining his reaction. She looked at herself in the mirror and wondered if he'd see her for who she was, not for the condition that had shaped her life. She had been born with Down syndrome, mild but noticeable. Her features were soft, her speech a bit slower, her expressions deeply sincere. She had hidden this part of herself out of fear, not deceit. The world had not been kind to her before, and she couldn't bear the thought of seeing disappointment in his eyes. But love, real or imagined, had pushed her to try. She wanted to be seen, truly seen, even if it broke her heart. On the morning of their planned meeting, Marielle messaged him again. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" "I've been ready for months," he replied. "Just tell me where." She sent the address, a small cafe near the town center. As Rowan packed his bag, he caught his reflection in the mirror. For the first time, he felt nervous. He brushed his hair twice, changed shirts 3 times, laughed at himself and whispered, "This is it." But deep down, something unexplainable lingered, a tension he couldn't name. The drive was long, filled with mixed emotions. The highway stretched endlessly, and the closer he got, the more his heart raced. Every time his phone buzzed with her text, he felt that familiar rush, comfort and anticipation colliding. Marielle sat at the cafe early, clutching her phone tightly. Her hands trembled slightly as she typed, deleted, and retyped messages. People around her smiled, ordered their drinks, went on with their lives. She was in her own world, balancing hope and fear in equal measure. When Rowan finally walked in, scanning the room for her, her breath caught. She recognized him instantly, his dark jacket, the way he looked around with cautious excitement. He didn't recognize her, not right away. She lifted her hand slowly, her eyes filled with both courage and apology. "Rowan?" He froze. The sound of his name coming from her voice was both familiar and foreign. In that instant, reality met expectation, and the silence that followed would define everything that came next. Her smile was tender, uncertain, his expression unreadable. Marielle whispered softly, "I told you I was afraid you'd change when you saw me." And for a brief moment the world stood still. Everything that followed, every choice, every word, would lead them to the unthinkable. The night before the trip, Rowan's small apartment was alive with nervous energy. His hands wouldn't stay still. He kept folding and unfolding the note he'd written for her. On the table sat a modest box wrapped in cream paper, tied with a thin blue ribbon. Inside was a silver necklace, simple yet meaningful. It carried a small charm shaped like an open heart, something he'd chosen weeks ago, imagining it resting against her skin. He wanted her to know that he wasn't meeting her out of curiosity but commitment. He had even pressed a flower between the pages of a book she once said she loved, The Moonlight Letters. Now that faded petal was tucked into the box too, as if it carried all the moments they had shared through words alone. His mirror reflected a man who looked more like a boy about to face a dream he wasn't sure he deserved. He rehearsed what he might say. "Hi, Marielle. Too plain. It's really you. Too dramatic. I've waited so long for this. Maybe that one." He laughed softly at himself, shaking his head. The laughter didn't last long. By the window, rain whispered against the glass. The world outside felt different that night, softer, quieter. His mind kept running back to her voice, how gentle it had sounded through the phone. He remembered her laughter, her small pauses when she thought about how to phrase things. There was something pure about her, something that made him want to protect her, even before meeting her. Before going to bed, he packed carefully. One clean shirt, a book for the trip, his old wristwatch, and the gift box. He didn't sleep much. Excitement wrestled with unease until dawn cracked through the blinds. By sunrise, he was already standing at the bus stop, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. In his chest, hope and nervousness danced together, impossible to separate. The seat fabric smelled faintly of detergent and something metallic. He placed his bag by his side, resting the gift box on his lap. For a moment, he traced the ribbon gently with his thumb. It felt like holding a promise. The bus began to move, and with every mile his anticipation grew. He thought of her messages, the way she'd send small goodnight notes like, "Sleep well, my almost favorite person." He smiled at the memory, though it made his chest tighten. Halfway through the journey, rain began to fall. Droplets slid across the window like threads of thought, constant, unstoppable. He found himself replaying her questions. "What if I'm not who you think I am? Would you still care if I wasn't perfect?" He had brushed them off then. Everyone has insecurities, he'd thought. Now, though, the words echoed differently. He looked out at the darkening sky. "Why does love always come with fear?" he whispered under his breath. A woman sitting across from him smiled faintly, perhaps thinking he was talking on the phone. Rowan offered a polite nod but didn't explain. The rhythmic sound of the bus tires on wet asphalt became almost hypnotic. Between moments of dozing and waking, flashes of imagined moments filled his mind. Marielle waiting at the cafe, her smile, her nervous wave. The future felt close enough to touch. By the time the bus pulled into the terminal, dusk was settling in. The small town felt still. Rows of dim shop signs, streets lined with damp leaves, the faint smell of rain-soaked earth. Rowan stepped out, stretching his legs, taking in the cool air that carried both promise and uncertainty. He opened his phone. There it was, her message from 10 minutes ago. "I'm already here, sitting near the window." His heart stuttered. He tightened his grip on the gift box, checking his reflection once more in the dark window of the terminal. His hair was slightly messy from the ride, his shirt creased. Still, he didn't care. The cafe was just a few blocks away. The sign glowed faintly in the distance, and with each step, his thoughts tangled further. Every sound seemed magnified. The crunch of gravel beneath his shoes, the distant hiss of tires through puddles, the faint hum of a streetlight flickering overhead. It felt as though the town itself was holding its breath. He paused outside the cafe, brushing a speck of dirt from his sleeve. Through the window he saw people talking, laughing softly, their words muted by the glass. Somewhere among them was her. He took one deep breath and pushed open the door. The bell above the door chimed gently as Rowan stepped inside. The scent of coffee and cinnamon filled the air. His eyes scanned the room. Faces blurred for a second, his pulse racing too fast to focus. Then he saw her, a young woman, seated alone near the corner window. She was wearing a soft green sweater, her hair tied neatly in a low braid. When she looked up, her face lit up, shy but genuine. Her eyes held something he recognized instantly, warmth, hope, and an emotion too deep to name. But as he walked closer, something inside him faltered. Her features were not what he had imagined from the photos. The symmetry, the softness of her expression, the subtle difference in her gaze. It struck him not as deception, but as a truth he hadn't been prepared for. She stood slowly, hands trembling slightly. "You came," she whispered. For a moment his voice caught. The air between them seemed heavy with everything unsaid. "Of course I came." She smiled, small, uncertain. Her hand brushed the edge of the table nervously, as though unsure if she should reach for him. He handed her the box. "I brought this for you." Her eyes widened, shimmering. She opened it carefully, her fingers tracing the necklace. "It's beautiful." He smiled weakly, the emotion in his chest tangled between compassion and confusion. As they sat together, Marielle spoke softly about her day, about how long she'd waited for this moment. Rowan tried to listen, but his thoughts spun in silent chaos. The way she spoke, the slight difference in her articulation, the innocence in her tone, it all painted a truth he hadn't expected. She wasn't what he thought, but she was still her. The girl who sent him songs, the one who said love was about patience and kindness. He stared at his coffee cup, words trapped somewhere in his throat. "You didn't tell me," he said quietly. She lowered her gaze. "I wanted to, so many times. But I thought you'd disappear like everyone else." Her honesty pierced him. He looked at her then, really looked. And for a fleeting second he saw not the shock of difference, but the familiar soul he had fallen for. Her smile, her vulnerability, her courage. But fear, subtle and stubborn, began to creep in. He wondered what people would say. He wondered if what he felt could survive this new truth. Outside, rain started again, faint at first, then steady. Their conversation slowed. Words grew careful, measured. Rowan's silence was louder than anything he could have said. Marielle's smile faded slightly. She could see it, the confusion in his eyes. "You don't have to say anything," she murmured. "I know." He looked up sharply. "No, it's not like that. I wasn't expecting. I understand." Her tone wasn't bitter. It was simply tired, the sound of someone who had lived through disappointment before. He reached for her hand but stopped halfway. The air felt fragile between them. A waitress passed by, placing a fresh napkin on their table. Neither moved. Rowan finally exhaled, voice low. "Can we take a walk?" She nodded, quietly hopeful. They left the cafe together, stepping into the rain. The sound of their footsteps echoed down the empty street, neither of them speaking. He carried the weight of 1,000 thoughts, none of which he was ready to face. When they reached the end of the block, she turned to him, her expression soft but steady. "Even if you can't love me," she said gently, "thank you for letting me believe you could." He couldn't find an answer, only silence. The night swallowed their words, leaving only the faint whisper of rain and the sound of two hearts standing too far apart. They walked slowly down a narrow lane lit by the cafe's glow. Rain had slowed to a hush, and the town smelled like wet pavement and warm coffee. Marielle's shoulders trembled just enough to show how hard she'd been holding herself together, and when she stopped, Rowan turned to her with an expression that had softened from confusion into patient attention. "I should have told you sooner," she said, voice small and steady. "I wanted to. I planned to. I typed the words. I deleted them. Over and over." She wrapped both hands around the hot cup she still held, as if it could keep the tremble away. "I was scared you would leave." Rowan listened the way he listened to music now, closely, trying to catch the smallest notes. He didn't speak. He had learned, in the weeks of messages and late-to-night calls, that the right silence could sometimes hold more kindness than the wrong sentence. Marielle folded her fingers in her lap and looked up at him. "I have Down syndrome," she said simply, like stating the time of day. "No drama, no flourish, only truth. It's been part of my life since I was born. It shapes some things, how people look at me, how fast I speak sometimes, how I learn. But it doesn't change the things that matter. I feel, I hope, I forgive, I make art, I hurt when people walk away." She told him about diagnosis rooms and gentle nurses, about teachers who pushed her and friends who stayed. She spoke of the ways people misread her at first glance, assuming soft meant small, or different meant lesser. She described, with a tenderness that made his throat ache, how her mother had been both refuge and champion, the person who taught her to tie shoelaces and to stand tall. When Marielle spoke of that loss, her voice broke. She did not hide the sorrow. Rowan watched, memorizing angles of grief he had never been asked to witness before. For Rowan, each sentence landed like a small stone dropped into a pond. Ripples of understanding spread, then collided with residue of surprise. He found his hand brushing the pendant in his pocket as if the metal could anchor him. She did not ask for pity, she asked to be seen. "I didn't want to hide from you," she said. "I only wanted you to know me first. I wanted you to love my words and my heart before anything else." The honesty was like an offering placed between them, fragile and luminous. He swallowed hard, feeling something shift. Compassion rose before judgment could take shape. He had always thought of himself as fair-minded, someone who could look beyond appearances. But words can feel different in the quiet of a cafe than they do in the sterile light of a screen. The gravity of her courage settled into him. He could not help but admire the bravery it took for her to sit there and say what she had. Marielle began to unspool the years. She spoke of childhood corners filled with crayons and songs, of a mother who hummed lullabies and called her my brave one. She described school days where some teachers expected less and others expected more, and how she learned to navigate both with a stubborn lightness. But the core of her story was quieter, the slow ache of losing someone who had been the center of her safe world. When Mama died, she said, fingers tracing the rim of her cup, the house changed. The colors were still there, but the music left. People came for a while. Then fewer came. I stopped getting letters. Nobody called as much. I learned the way loneliness can become a shape you carry. She admitted how that loneliness had pushed her online. The internet, she said, had been a kind of soft room where she could speak clearly and not be interrupted. There, people listened to her poems and the way she loved simple things. Stray cats, seashells, and the smell of bread. The digital world offered a place where words mattered more than the speed of speech or a stumble of thought. Rowan's messages had arrived in that space like sunlight. Marielle's narrative was not presented as a plea. It was a context. She explained the small kindnesses that kept her afloat. A neighbor who brought soup, a volunteer who taught art classes, the floral shop where she worked afternoons arranging blooms. She told Rowan about the times she had been laughed at in public, and the time someone held a door open without a second thought. Small, defining moments that had taught her both the cruelty and the generosity of people. Rowan felt each story as if it were a window opening inside him, letting in air he hadn't known he'd held his breath for. He thought about what had driven her to hide the very thing that made her who she was. It wasn't cunning, it was fear. The same fear that makes anyone choose safety over risk. She had chosen the chance that she would be loved for her words first. As she spoke, a pattern formed that was neither tragic nor triumphant. It was human. She loved. She lost. She wanted to be known. Rowan's assumptions, the ones that had formed in the heat of his unsupervised imagination, began to flatten, replaced by real, complicated textures. He was honest. I felt surprised, he admitted, and hurt. A part of me felt like a character in a story I didn't know was being edited. He watched her face as he said it, wanting to measure the cost of his own confession. She closed her eyes a moment, then opened them to look directly at him. I understand, she said simply. You were promised a face, and I gave you a heart first. That's a lot to ask of someone. I don't expect you to be a hero. I just hoped you might be brave. The tension in his chest loosened with those words. To her, his presence in that cafe, in that town, had already been an act of bravery. Yet for him, it was also a test of how he would meet life beyond the comfortable anonymity of typed replies. He found himself telling her the truth he had avoided. I am not sure what I am capable of yet. I thought I was ready for love. I learned I was ready for the idea of love. Seeing you made me realize how much I still fear. The confession was small and stark. It made her wince, not from pain, but from recognition. They spoke about expectations. She told him of the cruelty she had felt when others left, and he told her about the cautious walls he'd built after heartbreak. Neither argument demanded triumph. Both simply aired the human limits of wanting and needing. For a long minute, there was a quiet where both of them sat with their honesty. Marielle reached out and slid a folded napkin across the table, folded into a heart. This is what I can offer right now, she said. Not perfection, not a polished picture, just me. Rowan's throat tightened. Empathy settled over him like a slow rain. He realized he had been handed a truth so raw it might change him, and perhaps that was what he needed, not a smooth narrative, but a real person asking to be met. As the sky darkened and the cafe's customers thinned, their conversation took on a quieter intimacy. They talked about small things, the way light fell through stained glass, the smell of summer hay, the sensation of holding hands when the world felt too loud. Marielle described her favorite paintings in the gallery she had visited once with a volunteer. Rowan spoke about a song that had once made him forgive himself for failing a friend. It was intimate in a way that surprised him, not because it was erotic or dramatic, but because it was true. Two people, honest and fragile, sharing fragments of self that had been hidden from others. He found himself leaning forward, listening to the rhythm of her speech. She was deliberate, choosing words not for effect but for clarity. The pace of her talk showed a carefulness that made every sentence feel treasured. And yet, fear lingered between the syllables. She had asked him to stay, he had asked for time. Neither request negated the other. The intimacy they shared was full of wanting and of restraint, the bittersweet space where human connection often finds itself, close enough to heal, far enough to protect. He thought about what staying would mean, learning, patience, confronting his own prejudices. He thought about what leaving would mean, an easier life perhaps, less responsibility to change. Marielle's hand rested on the table now, near his. For a moment he considered the warmth of it. The world outside the cafe felt less important than the small, brave truth in front of him. "There are people who will judge," she whispered, and the words were not a plea but a warning. "I know how town talk can be, but I also know that not everyone is cruel. Not everyone leaves." Her eyes searched his as if cataloging sincerity. "I wanted you to know me for my words first because words don't leave as quickly as faces do." The idea lodged in him. He thought of his own quick departures, from jobs, from friends, from relationships. He had been impatient for comfort, but not for commitment. Marielle's openness invited him, not to rescue her, but to grow with her. Rowan's fingers felt numb when he reached for his coat. The necklace in his pocket seemed heavier than when he had given it to her. He needed air, he told himself. He needed a place to think where his thoughts could stop bouncing off the walls of the cafe. "I'll walk for a bit," he said. "I just need to clear my head. I didn't expect to be this overwhelmed." He tried to smile to soften the admission, but it landed as something raw. Marielle nodded. "Take your time," she said. "I'll be here when you come back. If you come back." He stepped out into the drizzle and felt the world press in around him, the low hum of a bus engine, the distant clack of shutters closing. He walked without destination, thoughts braided fast and tight. He replayed their conversation, trying to parse the part of him that recoiled and the part that remained open. Something in him had changed, he realized, not a grand revelation, but a small crack that let a new light through. He didn't yet know whether that light would heal him or simply expose more fractures. Either way, he needed time to decide whether his next action would be driven by fear or by courage. Behind him, Marielle watched his silhouette disappear into the rainy street, a small figure carrying a weight she hoped he might set down. She sipped the last warmth of her tea and folded her hands in her lap, holding on to the memory of his voice. She had offered everything she could, the truth, her heart, and the simple courage to meet him in that room. Now the rest belonged to him. The night wrapped around the town like a soft blanket, but for both of them, sleep would not come easily. Rowan walked further than he intended, his mind full of questions he could not yet answer. Marielle returned to the cafe table, staring at the empty seat across from her, willing the silence to become something kinder. This was the kind of crossroads that marks lives. Would honesty be the bridge between them, or the boundary that kept them apart? "Now I want to hear from you, and this is important for the next chapter of the story. If you were Rowan in that moment, standing outside in the rain, holding someone's truth in your hands, what would you have done? Would you have stayed and listened more, letting compassion guide you? Would you have walked away to sort your thoughts, returning later with clearer intentions? Or would you have chosen something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Be honest. Be thoughtful. Your answers shape how we all think about love, fear, and responsibility. And if this story is resonating, hit like and subscribe. More of these true-feel, moral-driven stories are on the way. The rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened under the dim street lights. Rowan's shoes slapped against the wet pavement as he made his way back to the cafe. The silence of the night felt different now, stretched, uncertain, and heavy with something he couldn't yet name. He had taken a long walk, trying to clear the storm inside his head. The truth Marielle had shared had shaken him in ways he couldn't untangle. Compassion had battled with discomfort, empathy with pride. But after an hour of pacing through empty streets, he knew one thing: he didn't want to lose her. He rehearsed what he'd say once he saw her again. He'd tell her he understood, or was trying to. He'd say her honesty mattered more than anything she'd hidden. He even smiled faintly at the thought of her shy laugh when he returned. But when he reached the cafe, the lights were dimmed. Chairs were stacked on tables. The counter was empty. Only one thing remained in sight, a red umbrella leaning against the corner by the door. It was hers. He froze. His reflection wavered in the glass door as his pulse quickened. The umbrella, the one she always carried, was still wet, dripping faintly onto the tile floor. If she had gone home, she would have taken it. "Marielle?" he called softly through the glass, but only the hum of the old refrigerator answered. He tried the door, locked. Panic crept in slow and deliberate. He stepped back onto the street, scanning in every direction. A few pedestrians passed under street lamps, their faces indifferent. He pulled out his phone, checked for messages. Nothing. Not one missed call. A bus rattled by, spraying puddles onto the curb. Still no sign of her. The silence that followed pressed against him, cold and accusing. He gripped the red umbrella and started walking, faster now, toward the direction of the park where they had once said they might go someday. That someday had arrived, and it felt wrong. Rowan's footsteps echoed against the empty sidewalks. Every few seconds he whispered her name under his breath, as if the air itself could deliver it to her. He reached the park entrance, the one framed by two rusted gates. The faint glow of the streetlights scattered across puddles like broken glass. Beyond the gates, trees stood like still silhouettes, and somewhere within, water shimmered faintly. The pond. The sound of distant sirens made his stomach twist. They were faint at first, just a whisper, but growing nearer. His mind tried to reason. Maybe someone fell, maybe a car accident. It couldn't be her. He gripped the umbrella tighter. It was the only thing grounding him now. The faint floral scent on the fabric still lingered, mixed with rain. Rowan turned down a dirt path leading deeper into the park. He saw flashes of movement. People gathered ahead, shadows cast by red and blue lights flickering across wet ground. The sirens grew louder, and then, as he stepped closer, he saw police tape fluttering near the pond. A small crowd had gathered, a jogger, two teenagers, a man walking his dog. Their murmurs carried through the damp air, uncertain, broken, and heavy with speculation. Rowan felt his legs weaken as dread climbed his spine. He tried to step forward, but someone held him back, a uniformed officer shouting something he couldn't process. His eyes darted past the tape. Under the dim light of a park lamppost, the water looked black, disturbed by the rain. At its edge lay a shape covered by a reflective blanket, the kind used by emergency responders. Rowan's world tilted. His throat closed. He didn't need to see her face. He already knew. "Sir, step back," an officer barked, but his legs didn't move. The red umbrella slipped from his fingers, landing softly on the wet ground beside him. People whispered around him, their words weaving into one another until they became meaningless noise. He caught fragments. She was sitting by the pond earlier. "I heard someone arguing." She ran off crying. "They said a man followed her, maybe that one." The words cut through him like small blades. A paramedic crouched near the body, speaking quietly into a radio. A police officer glanced at Rowan, his expression shifting between suspicion and pity. Rowan's heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the sirens. "It can't be her," he muttered. No, she said she'd wait." But she hadn't waited. Or maybe she had, and something had gone terribly wrong. A soft thud. His knees hit the ground. Rain soaked through his jeans as he stared at the outline under the blanket. The officer beside him was saying something, but it was just static in his ears. He wanted to speak, to explain, but the words dissolved before they reached his lips. Marielle was gone, and in that instant, guilt wrapped itself around him like a chain. The cafe owner told officers that Marielle had been there waiting for a man, polite, nervous, carrying a red umbrella. She had smiled all evening, talking about someone named Rowan. A teenage boy who often skated near the park claimed he'd seen two figures near the pond arguing. He was tall, the boy said, looked upset. She walked away crying. Others swore they heard nothing at all, just the rain. Every voice painted a different picture, but every version pointed toward Rowan. His name circulated through whispers, half-truths, and assumptions. By the time the police knocked on his motel door, he was sitting on the floor, still soaked, still gripping the umbrella like a relic. "Mr. Rowan, we need to ask you some questions." The tone wasn't harsh, but it carried weight. He followed them silently. The corridor stretched endlessly, every light flickering as if mocking his exhaustion. Outside, a few bystanders gathered behind yellow tape near the park's edge. Their expressions weren't cruel. just curious, judgmental in the way small towns can be when tragedy arrives. Inside the small interview room, everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and damp clothes. A single fluorescent bulb buzzed overhead. Rowan sat with his hands clasped tightly. Across from him sat Detective Hallen, a man with steady eyes and a notebook filled with lines that might determine fate. "Start from the beginning," the detective said. Rowan did. He told them about meeting Marielle online, their connection, their honesty, and the moment he learned about her condition. He admitted to walking away, not in anger but confusion. He told them he'd returned, only to find her gone. The detective nodded occasionally but didn't soften. "So, you left her alone after an emotional conversation?" "Yes, but I came back. I didn't know." "You didn't call anyone when you couldn't find her? I thought she'd gone home." Rowan's voice cracked. "She said she'd wait for me." The silence that followed was unbearable. The detective leaned forward. People heard raised voices at the park. "I wasn't there," Rowan protested. His pulse raced. "I was walking the streets, thinking, you can check cameras, anything." The officer's pen scratched across paper. Every second felt like a verdict. Finally, the detective leaned back. "Until we confirm otherwise, you're a person of interest." The phrase sliced through him. Person of interest. Rowan pressed his palms to his face. The image of Marielle, her soft eyes, her trembling honesty, filled the darkness behind his eyelids. When they released him later that night, he walked aimlessly through streets blurred by mist. The world looked distant, unreal, like a dream refusing to end. He stopped at the cafe again. The red umbrella still leaned by the door, sealed inside an evidence bag now. He stared at it for a long time, his reflection fractured by the plastic. That small object carried the last trace of her, and of his failure. He sank onto the curb, shoulders trembling. He didn't hurt her. He knew that. But he had hurt her in other ways. By leaving. By making her question whether her truth had cost her love. Every conversation replayed in his mind, her voice breaking when she said, "I wanted you to love my heart first." He had promised himself he'd come back ready to listen. He was too late. Tears came quietly, not dramatic, but drained and raw. When dawn broke, he was still sitting there, a silent figure holding his own guilt like punishment. The investigation stretched into days, then weeks. The autopsy revealed drowning, but whether accidental or otherwise remained unclear. Rumors persisted. Some said she slipped, others said she was pushed. Rowan stopped correcting people. He stopped speaking altogether for a time. His silence became its own confession to those who didn't understand. He attended the small memorial near the pond. Locals brought flowers and candles. The cafe owner placed Marielle's favorite cup beside the water. Rowan stood at the back, unnoticed, holding a single white daisy. When he dropped it into the pond, it floated briefly before sinking. A woman beside him whispered to another, "That's him, the one who met her online." He didn't look up. He didn't defend himself. He only whispered, "I'm sorry," though the words were lost to the wind. That night, back in his motel room, he replayed every moment again and again, until guilt became his only company. He didn't take her life, but he couldn't escape the feeling that he'd let it end in loneliness. And in that quiet, suffocating grief, Rowan understood. Sometimes the worst crimes are not those committed by hands, but by hesitation. Story 2. The water moved like glass that night, calm, endless, and quiet enough to hear the wind sigh. The yacht glided across the bay under a silver moon, its lights faint against the vast darkness. Music drifted from the deck, laughter, then silence, as though the ocean itself held its breath. A soft scarf, pale blue, edged with lace, fluttered from the railing, catching a whisper of wind before slipping into the black water below. No one reached for it. Moments later, the boat's laughter was gone too, swallowed by distance and tide. By sunrise, the dock was empty, the red balloons deflated, and the name Marion carried only by those searching for her. A mother, a friend, a woman who wanted one more chance at love. She left home that evening smiling. A message to her daughter, a spritz of perfume, a promise to be careful. She was meeting someone special, someone who made her believe in happiness again. But the night she finally stepped onto that boat was the night she never came home. Before that night, Before the headlines and the questions, Marion was simply trying to fill the quiet. Her home was neat, her garden trimmed, her days gentle but hollow. The clock ticked louder when the sun went down, and the chair across from her at dinner remained forever empty. She wasn't chasing adventure, just conversation. Someone to ask how her day was, to listen when she spoke about the little things that used to matter. After losing her husband, even laughter felt like a memory borrowed from another lifetime. That's why the ad caught her eye. Find companionship at any age. The word companionship stirred something in her chest. Soft, harmless, hopeful. Maybe it wasn't too late to feel seen again. She told herself it would be simple, just chats, maybe coffee, nothing serious. But hope is tricky. It begins quietly, disguised as curiosity. One click became a message. One message became a smile. Before she knew it, she wasn't scrolling out of boredom anymore. She was waiting for him. He called himself Darren. And from that moment, her story began to change. It started with a single notification. You have a new match. Marion hesitated before opening it. Her heart thudded like it used to before school dances decades ago. The photo was simple. A man standing on a boat, wind brushing through his hair, a smile that looked effortless but confident. His name, Darren. His first message read, "You have the kindest eyes I've ever seen." Marion laughed softly to herself, shaking her head. It was the sort of thing her husband might have said when they were young. Still, she replied, "Thank you. I wasn't expecting anyone to notice." That's how it began. Light words exchanged between two lonely people across a glowing screen. He told her he worked near the water, loved sunsets, and believed laughter made people younger. His messages came with timing so precise it felt intentional, just when she needed them. Morning greetings, evening notes, compliments that didn't feel rehearsed. For the first time in years, she felt seen, heard, understood. But what Marion couldn't see through her phone was the truth, that sometimes the people who make you feel most alive are the same ones capable of taking everything away. Marion wasn't looking for passion, not the kind that burned bright and disappeared fast. She wanted peace, conversation, laughter that came softly. After losing her husband, she'd spent years learning to live in quiet moments, watering plants, folding laundry, sitting by the window as the sun slipped away. Darren's words began to fill those silences. He spoke of sailing across calm water, of cooking seafood dinners for two, of how love didn't end with age. It just found new ways to exist. His messages arrived with rhythm, a gentle consistency that felt safe. He asked about her favorite meals, her garden, her memories of youth. He said things like, "You remind me of calm seas, steady, comforting, endless." Marion believed him. She wanted to. Her friends teased her gently about her digital romance, but she defended it. "He's different," she'd say, smiling. "He listens." Still, there were tiny gaps, small pauses between replies, little shifts in tone she ignored because she wanted to believe the best. Hope can be the sweetest illusion, especially when it hides the cracks beneath it. That night, as she sat reading his newest message, "Can't wait to finally see you in person," she didn't know that decision would become the final chapter of her story. The moon floated high above Clearwater Bay, its reflection trembling across the dark water. Laughter echoed faintly from a yacht anchored near the dock, soft at first, then swallowed by the hum of waves. A silk scarf, light blue, scented faintly of jasmine, lifted into the air before drifting toward the railing. Marion reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as the wind tugged it free. It slipped from her grasp and disappeared into the night. "Careful," Darren called from behind her, his tone unreadable. "You wouldn't want to fall." The music played on, muffled by distance, while the water rocked the boat in slow rhythm. Marion turned to reply, but her voice caught. The light around them flickered from the deck lanterns, and the laughter above seemed to fade into something else. Muffled voices, footsteps, then silence. By morning, the marina was still. Her car sat parked exactly where she'd left it, her phone, her purse, untouched in the cabin below deck. She never came home. Her daughter's call went unanswered. The police arrived by noon, the dock now surrounded by yellow tape and whispers. And somewhere out on that quiet stretch of sea, The truth waited beneath the tide. But before that night, before the silence, before the fear, Marion was simply a woman searching for connection, searching for warmth, searching for the one thing loneliness convinces us we'll never find again, love. Would you have trusted someone you met online? Before we begin Marion's story, a story about hope, heartbreak, and the price of misplaced trust, don't forget to subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story for more true stories that remind us how fragile trust can be. The morning sun slipped gently through the curtains of Marion's small home on the edge of Clearwater. The house still carried the rhythm of a life once shared. 2 coffee cups on the shelf, 2 pillows on the bed, one side untouched for years. Every corner held a faint echo of laughter, the soft hum of shared songs, and the steady voice of the man she once called her forever. Her husband had been gone for 4 years, but the silence he left behind felt as loud as thunder. Cancer had taken him slowly, one hospital visit at a time. Marion had been his caretaker until the final breath, her days a mix of exhaustion and devotion. When the machines stopped, so did a part of her. Now she spent her mornings watering plants that refused to bloom, and her evenings watching the same news report she hardly listened to. Sometimes she'd speak into the quiet as though he could still hear her. Small, tender updates about the world, the neighbor's dog had puppies today, or your favorite show's been canceled. But as the years stretched on, those moments grew fewer. The silence became her routine companion. The kettle's whistle filled the gaps where conversation used to live. She didn't feel old, but she did feel unseen, as though the world had moved on while she remained anchored to the memory of love. There were nights when she'd sit on the porch, staring at the fading horizon and whisper, "I just wish someone would ask how my day was again." That wish, quiet, harmless, innocent, would become the first step toward the night that changed everything. Loneliness doesn't always arrive with loud footsteps. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, wearing the disguise of ordinary days. For Marion, it showed up between her morning tea and her nightly glass of wine. It lived in the way she lingered over old photographs, tracing the edge of her husband's smile with trembling fingers. It spoke softly each evening when she turned off the living room light and walked alone to bed. She wasn't searching for grand passion anymore, just connection. Someone to ask about her garden, someone to laugh at her clumsy jokes, someone to remind her that she still mattered. The world had a cruel way of convincing older women that affection was a young person's game, that tenderness had an expiration date. Marion knew better, but still, she felt invisible. She started to notice couples in grocery store aisles, the way a man's hand rested on his partner's back, or how a woman adjusted her husband's collar before they left the checkout line. Those small gestures, so easy for others, made her chest tighten. She didn't envy them, but she missed belonging to something warm. Sometimes she would wake from dreams where her husband still held her hand, only to find the space beside her cold. She'd sigh, whispering his name like a secret, and remind herself that grief doesn't vanish. It softens until it disguises itself as longing. That longing began to shift one quiet Sunday when she caught a commercial for a dating app. "Find companionship at any age," the voice said. It seemed harmless enough, just a modern way to talk to people. But as the ad faded, something inside her stirred, not desperation but courage. For the first time in years, Marion considered that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't done being loved. Marion's heart was at war with itself. Each time she thought about meeting someone new, guilt rose like a tide, washing over her quiet courage. How could she, after all these years of loving one man, even think about another? It felt like betrayal, not to anyone else, but to the memory that had kept her company through the loneliest years. She still kept her husband's jacket on the coat rack by the door. His wedding band sat inside her jewelry box, next to a folded napkin with his handwriting, "Love you, always," even in silence. Sometimes she opened the box just to feel close to him again. But silence, she'd learned, can turn from comfort to torment. It began to feel like a second shadow following her through the house, always there, never speaking back. There were days she caught herself laughing at a TV show, only to realize no one else was there to laugh with her. That realization would hit hard, followed by a wave of shame for even noticing. Her children told her she deserved happiness, but it wasn't that simple. Grief doesn't end when others think it should. It lingers, demanding loyalty. Yet beneath the guilt was something even stronger, the quiet ache to be known again. She wanted to share her stories with someone who'd listen, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care. She wanted to hold a hand that wasn't from memory. She wanted to feel seen, not as the widow, not as mom, but as Marion. It was that longing, tender but insistent, that finally pushed her to pick up her phone one night and whisper, almost apologetically, "It's time." That's when she downloaded Bumble. The glow from Marion's phone illuminated the quiet living room as she hesitated over the download button. Her heart fluttered like it used to before big moments. The first day of college, her wedding, her children's births. Only this time, the excitement was tangled with fear. When the app finally opened, she was met with a flood of faces, smiling strangers, all searching for something. Some profiles felt careless, others too perfect. She wondered if any of them were real. Still, curiosity pushed her forward. Setting up her profile was harder than she'd expected. The app asked for a photo first. Marion scrolled through her gallery, pausing at a picture her daughter had taken on her birthday. Soft silver hair, gentle eyes, the faint trace of a smile. "Good enough," she murmured, though part of her wished her husband could have seen it. Then came the bio section. "Say something about yourself." She stared at the blinking cursor, her fingers hovering. What could she say after a lifetime of being part of someone else's story? Finally, she typed, "I love gardening, old movies, and quiet laughter." Looking for good conversation and kindness, she read it twice, her heart beating fast. It felt like handing a piece of herself to the unknown. When she finally hit save, the app greeted her with bright confetti animations and cheerful words. "You're ready to meet new people." She almost laughed at the absurdity of it, the idea that companionship could start with a swipe. But then again, wasn't that how the world worked now? That night, she lay in bed, phone on her chest, feeling both foolish and hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, this was how second chances began, quietly, with courage disguised as curiosity. There comes a point in life when you look in the mirror and realize time has changed everything, your reflection, your circle, even your definition of happiness. Marion often felt that way. The lines on her face weren't just signs of age, they were stories etched into her skin. Years of love, loss, laughter, and pain. Yet beneath it all, there was still a spark, a small, persistent whisper that said, "You're not done living yet." She'd sit by the window sometimes, watching younger couples walk by hand in hand, their laughter spilling into the quiet evening. It didn't make her jealous, just wistful. She didn't crave youth, she craved connection. Someone who'd look at her and see more than a widow. Someone who'd see the woman she still was. But that's the thing about starting over later in life. It's both terrifying and liberating. You know what heartbreak feels like, but you also know that loneliness can hurt even more. So, she tried. Not because she was desperate, but because she was brave. Because she refused to let fear dictate what was left of her life. Have you ever felt like that? Too old to chase something new, yet too alive to give up. It's a quiet battle. The longing for connection versus the instinct to protect yourself from more pain. For Marion, the act of downloading that app wasn't just about dating. It was about reclaiming her right to feel wanted, to laugh again, to be reminded that her story wasn't over. If you've ever been in that place, where courage and fear meet at the edge of hope, leave A in the comments below. Because sometimes, even the smallest act of courage deserves to be seen. The first time Marion saw his message, she nearly dropped her phone. It was simple. "Hi, Marion. Your smile feels like sunlight." She laughed quietly to herself, shaking her head at the unexpected warmth that crept into her chest. Compliments had become rare in her world, and this one, though digital, landed softly. His name was Darren. His profile showed a man standing beside a sleek white boat, hair tousled by the wind, his grin easy and unforced. His words carried a sense of confidence without arrogance, the kind that made Marion curious. Their first conversation started cautiously. Marion wasn't used to chatting online. Her messages were polite, a bit hesitant, as though she were testing the temperature of the water. But Darren made it easy. He asked about her favorite, books, the kind of tea she liked, and whether she preferred sunsets or sunrises. When she replied sunsets, always, he responded. Then, maybe one day I'll show you one from the deck. The kind where the sky melts into the sea. It was playful, yet there was tenderness in it. That night, Marion went to bed smiling for the first time in months. His messages didn't feel forced or shallow. They were slow, deliberate, thoughtful, the kind of attention that feels rare when the world has moved on without you. Within a few days, they were exchanging long paragraphs about life, his love for the ocean, her passion for gardening. Darren shared that he'd once lost someone too, and Marion felt an instant connection through that shared grief. It wasn't just flirtation, it felt like understanding. When he sent a voice note, deep, calm, and warm, her breath caught. Hearing him speak made everything feel real, as though he'd stepped through the screen into her quiet kitchen. That night, she wrote in her journal, "He listens. He remembers the small things. Maybe kindness still exists in unexpected places." She didn't know it then, but that first high would change everything, turning her lonely evenings into messages filled with laughter, warmth, and a fragile new hope. Before we continue, pause for a moment. Think about Marion, 61, soft-spoken, kind-hearted, sitting alone at her kitchen table with her phone glowing faintly in the dark. She wasn't chasing thrills or pretending to be someone else. She was simply trying to feel seen again. How many of us have done the same? Maybe not on a dating app, but through a text, a memory, or a message we hoped someone would answer. Loneliness doesn't care about age. It finds us in empty rooms, in the silence after laughter fades, in the spaces where someone we loved used to be. Marion's story is not just about danger. It's about courage, the kind it takes to try again after heartbreak, the kind it takes to say, maybe I still deserve love, and that's something many people never admit out loud. So, before we go deeper into her story, let's take a moment for those who have ever reached out in hope. If you've ever felt lonely, but brave enough to seek connection, leave a heart in the comments below. Your courage, like Marion's, matters, because every time someone reaches out, whether online or in real life, they're saying something powerful. I still believe in love. I still believe in kindness. It's easy to judge people who trust too soon. It's harder to understand what it means to live without touch, without laughter, without the sound of another heartbeat beside yours. So let's not just listen to Marion's story. Let's feel it. Her journey reminds us that love, at any age, is both beautiful and dangerous when given to the wrong person. But her bravery, her willingness to hope again, deserves to be remembered. Now, let's return to that fragile beginning. The messages, the laughter, and the bond that grew faster than Marion ever expected. It began innocently. A good evening, Marion. How was your day? And a soft smile emoji. From that moment, nights that once ended in silence now hummed with conversation. Every evening after dinner, Marion sat by the window with her phone glowing in her hand. Darren always seemed to appear just when the loneliness started to bite. Their messages carried comfort, lighthearted at first, then deeper, warmer. He asked about her garden, about the songs she liked from her younger days. Marion told him she loved the classics, melodies her husband once hummed while fixing the fence. Darren replied with a link to a love song, saying it reminded him of her. When she played it, she felt her chest tighten, not from sadness, but from something she hadn't felt in years, connection. Their laughter became effortless. She teased him for his old man jokes, and he told her that her laughter sounded like home. They spoke about things that went beyond surface, regret, aging, grief. He confessed that he too had lost someone once. Whether that was true or not, Marion never questioned it. His words carried tenderness, the kind that slips through guarded hearts unnoticed. One night, as the rain tapped against her window, Darren said, "You know, I've never met someone who makes me feel at peace just by talking." Marion smiled to herself, her cheeks warm. "Maybe we were meant to find each other," she wrote back. From that night, her evenings belonged to him. The glow of her phone replaced the emptiness of the room. Her loneliness, once sharp and cold, softened beneath the comfort of his words. She didn't know it yet, but each message was a thread, gentle, binding, and quietly tightening. As days turned into weeks, their chats grew longer, stretching past midnight. Marion found herself waiting for his good morning, sunshine before she brewed her coffee. It became part of her rhythm, like breath. They shared details, the little, vulnerable kind. Darren said he couldn't sleep unless he heard the sound of the ocean. Marion admitted she left her bedside lamp on because darkness made her think too much. In those shared confessions, she felt understood. Sometimes their messages carried flirtation, not overt but tender. He told her he imagined her in her garden, sunlight catching the silver in her hair. She replied shyly, saying she hadn't been called beautiful in years. He answered, "That's because the world's been blind." For Marion, affection had always come through actions. A hand held, a meal shared, a quiet smile from across the table. But through Darren, she was learning that warmth could live in words. She caught herself rereading his messages before sleep, smiling at his voice notes that ended with, "Sweet dreams, beautiful soul." In the quiet of the night, his voice played in her mind like a song she didn't want to end. For the first time since her husband's passing, she allowed herself to dream of laughter on a beach, of 2 glasses of wine clinking under fading sunlight. But behind Darren's charm was a rhythm too smooth, too well practiced. Each word seemed designed to make her feel special, and yet she never noticed. Because when you've been alone long enough, even a simple compliment can feel like salvation. Darren knew exactly how to listen, or at least how to make Marion believe he did. When she spoke about her husband, he didn't interrupt. When she admitted she sometimes felt guilty for moving on, he whispered comfort through the phone. He'd want you to be happy. Those words broke something open inside her. Grief and guilt melted into relief. For the first time, she didn't feel judged. He began to take a larger space in her thoughts. Her phone became her companion. When she cooked, she imagined telling him about the meal. When she read, she highlighted lines she wanted to share. He'd become a presence in her day, an invisible shadow she welcomed. Darren often told her, "You remind me that there's still kindness left in this world." And Marion believed him. She wanted to. Yet there were moments, small, fleeting, that brushed her with unease. Once she noticed he avoided video calls, claiming his camera was broken. Another time he said he was traveling for work, but sent a photo with an old calendar visible in the background. The signs were there, but her heart, fragile and yearning, dismissed them as small things, because when someone makes you feel seen after years of invisibility, doubt feels like betrayal. And so she stayed, trusting, believing, waiting for a man whose words felt like home. Darren had a gift, the kind that made people open up easily. He spoke with the calm confidence of someone who'd studied hearts, who knew how to say what someone needed to hear. He never rushed their conversations. He let silence linger just enough to make his next message feel intentional. "You have a calming energy," he'd write, "like you carry sunlight even on cloudy days." For Marion, who'd spent years feeling invisible, those words felt like air filling her lungs again. She sent him photos of her garden, her coffee mugs, even the view from her porch, small pieces of her world she hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. He'd respond with compliments that felt personal. That smile could stop storms. "If I were there, I'd never let you sit alone." Yet behind every affectionate phrase was calculation. He asked questions: where she lived, if her children visited often, if she preferred the sea or the city. He said it was casual talk, but it was more than that. Each answer gave him more control. Still, Marion couldn't see the danger. To her, Darren was thoughtful, maybe even protective. She mistook his quiet possessiveness for care. Love, or what looked like it, had blinded her to the pattern of control quietly forming around her heart. The first real hesitation came one Friday night. Marion asked if they could video chat. He laughed it off. "The camera on this old phone barely works. I don't want you to see me as a blurry mess." She laughed too, letting the discomfort slip away. The next came when she asked what exactly he did for work. Sometimes he said he was a marine consultant. Other times, a boat contractor. Once he claimed he'd been restoring yachts on the Gulf Coast. The shifting details brushed against her sense of logic, but again, she forgave it. He's probably just simplifying things, she told herself. When you want something to be real, the mind will find ways to explain away the cracks. Darren's words continued to soothe her. He sent her goodnight voice notes, soft and slow, the kind that made her heart ache. He said, "I don't care how far apart we are. I feel like I already know your soul." She believed him, because hope, when starved for too long, doesn't need proof, only promise. Marion's friends warned her gently. "Be careful," her friend Nora said. "People aren't always who they say they are." Marion nodded, but inside she thought, they don't know him like I do. The truth was, she didn't either. Marion told herself love shouldn't require suspicion. She wanted to believe that good still existed, that not every man was waiting to hurt someone. Her late husband had been kind. Why couldn't someone else be? Her heart clung to hope like a child holding a fragile balloon. Every warning sign, every half-truth, floated away under the weight of her desire to feel cherished. One night, Darren said softly, "You make me believe in second chances." Those words became her anchor. She replayed them often, not realizing they came from a man who used affection as bait. She began planning a meeting, a dinner, a coffee, something simple. Darren hesitated but finally said, "Maybe soon, when the weather's right." That small delay didn't break her trust. It deepened her anticipation. To Marian, love had always been about patience, forgiveness, and faith. She never imagined those same virtues could be used against her. Before we move forward, let's pause again. Marian's story reminds us how trust begins, not with blindness, but with hope. She wasn't naive, she was human. She wanted connection, affection, reassurance, and Darren knew exactly how to offer it, until she mistook his control for care. Now ask yourself, have you ever ignored a red flag because you wanted to believe in someone's goodness? Maybe it was a lie brushed off as a joke, or a secret excused as no big deal. It happens to more people than we realize. Sometimes it's not about being careless, it's about wanting love to win. If you've ever looked past a red flag because your heart hoped for the best, tell us below. Your story might open another person's eyes. Because the truth is, people like Marian don't fall for charm. They fall for kindness, for words that feel like warmth after years of cold. Her messages with Darren felt safe, comforting, real. But as we'll see next, safety can sometimes be an illusion built on trust that was never deserved. It was a quiet Thursday evening when Marian's phone buzzed. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, expecting a message from her daughter, but instead, it was Darren. Guess what? The message read, "I'm hosting a small boat party this weekend. Just some friends, good music, a few glasses of wine. You should come." Her heart skipped. For weeks, their conversations had lived behind screens, confined to words and imagination. Now the distance was about to close. The thought of finally meeting him, hearing his laugh in real life, seeing his smile up close, made her pulse quicken. Darren followed with another text. "I'll be waiting by the dock at Clearwater Bay. Look for red balloons so you can't miss me." It sounded playful, almost cinematic. She reread the message several times, each word wrapping around her with the promise of something new, something real. That night, Marian couldn't sleep. Her mind replayed every exchange, every soft compliment, every good night Darren had ever sent. Could it truly be happening? After so many years of loneliness, could she finally be stepping into a new beginning? Her reflection in the mirror looked different that night, more alive, more daring. Beneath the cautious ache in her heart, a spark of anticipation began to grow. She whispered to herself, maybe it's time to live again. The invitation, simple and sweet on the surface, carried a weight she couldn't yet understand. Friday morning arrived with sunlight spilling through the curtains. Marian stood before her wardrobe, fingers tracing the fabric of old dresses. Most were practical, soft cardigans, floral blouses. None felt right for a moment like this. So she went shopping. At the small downtown boutique, she found it, a soft blue summer dress that fluttered just below her knees. It reminded her of youth, of ocean skies and open doors. When she tried it on, she smiled for the first time in a long while, a real smile that reached her eyes. She added small pearl earrings and a silver bracelet her husband once gave her. A quiet part of her felt guilt, as if she were replacing memories with new ones. But another voice whispered, "You're not replacing. You're continuing." That evening she laid the dress on her bed and stared at it, imagining Darren's reaction. Would he notice the way it matched her eyes? Would he compliment her the way he did in messages? For the first time in years she felt that nervous, youthful excitement, the kind that makes the heart flutter for no reason at all. Her phone buzzed again. "Can't wait to finally meet you, beautiful. Saturday can't come soon enough." Marian clutched the phone to her chest, her cheeks warm. She whispered, "Me too." If only she had known how that message, that simple, hopeful moment, would mark the beginning of her final chapter. Saturday morning came bright and clear. Marian was ironing her dress when the phone rang. It was Nora, her oldest friend. "Big plans tonight?" Nora asked, her tone light but cautious. Marion hesitated, then admitted, "I'm finally meeting Darren. He invited me to a little boat party. Isn't that wonderful?" Silence filled the line before Nora said gently, "Mare, please be careful. You've never met him in person. You don't know who else will be there." Marion laughed softly, though it sounded forced even to her. "You worry too much. He's been nothing but kind. I've talked to him for weeks, Nora. I think I can trust him. Kind people can still lie," Nora said, her voice firm now. "At least tell someone where you're going." "I will," Marion promised, though she hadn't decided if she would. She didn't want anyone's doubt to stain her fragile happiness. Before hanging up, Nora added, "Just make sure you come home safe, all right?" After the call ended, Marion sat quietly for a while. The room felt smaller somehow. She tried to shake off the unease. Darren wouldn't hurt her, she was sure of it. He'd made her laugh when no one else could. She folded her cardigan, brushed her hair, and reminded herself that love requires courage. Still, Nora's words lingered like a faint echo she couldn't quite silence. The evening air carried the scent of salt and fuel as Marion arrived at Clearwater Bay. The sun had begun to dip, painting the water in amber streaks. Boats swayed gently, their ropes creaking like whispers. She followed the directions Darren had sent, her heart thudding softly in her chest. Then she saw them, 3 bright red balloons tied to the dock post. Her lips parted in surprise. He really had done it, and there he was, taller than she'd expected, with a smile that seemed practiced yet warm. He waved. "Marion, you made it." For a moment all her nerves dissolved. She felt foolish for ever doubting him. He offered his hand as she stepped onto the deck. His palm was rough, steady. "Careful," he said. "Don't want you falling before the night even begins." Music floated from a small speaker. The boat shimmered with fairy lights. 2 other men stood near the rail, laughing with drinks in hand. Darren introduced them quickly, names Marion barely caught over the hum of the engine. She smiled politely, her fingers gripping her glass of wine. The water reflected golden streaks from the sky, and for a while she let herself believe in the charm of it all. But beneath the music and laughter, a subtle unease rippled through her chest. Darren handed her another glass of wine, his fingers brushing hers. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. She smiled faintly, though her stomach felt oddly tight. As the boat drifted away from the dock, laughter echoed around them. Marion noticed Darren's friends glancing at her. Too often, too long. Their jokes were louder now, their eyes less kind. She tried to ignore it, focusing on the ocean's rhythm. Darren placed his hand on her shoulder, guiding her toward the bow. "Look at that sunset," he said. The sky glowed orange and violet, the kind of view that made everything else fade. "You deserve nights like this," he whispered close to her ear. The compliment should have warmed her, but instead it made her uneasy. His tone had changed, softer, heavier. When one of the men laughed crudely from behind, Darren chuckled too, pretending not to notice Marion's discomfort. She forced a small smile, trying not to seem rude. "Relax," he said. "You're too tense." His grip on her arm lingered longer than it should have. Something inside her, instinct maybe, began to stir. As night deepened, the party changed rhythm. The laughter grew coarse, the music louder. Marion felt herself shrinking into her seat, pretending to enjoy the conversation. Darren was different now, less attentive, more detached. He poured another drink she didn't want. When she refused, he smirked. "Don't be shy. It's just wine." The sea air, once refreshing, now felt heavy. The lights on the water blurred slightly. She realized she hadn't eaten since noon, and the wine had made her dizzy. Darren leaned closer. "You okay?" "I just need a little air," she murmured, standing. Her steps wobbled slightly as she made her way to the lower deck. The laughter above sounded distant, distorted. She held onto the railing, breathing deeply. Her reflection wavered in the dark water, older, softer, uncertain. Behind her, footsteps approached. Darren's voice was low. "You shouldn't wander off alone. I just needed space," she said quietly. He smiled and his eyes didn't match. "You trust me, don't you?" It wasn't a question. It was a test. And Marion, heart trembling, whispered, "Of course." That answer would soon haunt her. The waves lapped against the hull, steady and soft. Marion clutched the railing as the wind tugged at her scarf. She wanted to go home, but she didn't want to offend him. "Maybe we should head back soon," she said gently. Darren looked toward the horizon, unmoving. "So soon? The night's still young." Something in his tone made her freeze. She forced a smile. "I'm just tired, that's all." He turned to her, his face unreadable. "You always worry too much," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The contact felt wrong, not tender, not kind. The laughter from above had stopped. The music, too. Only the ocean remained, whispering secrets no one would ever repeat. For a moment she thought she saw a flash of something, not anger, not joy, but something distant, detached. Her pulse quickened. "Let's go back," she said again. Darren didn't respond. He just stared out at the endless water, his expression blank. The moon climbed higher, and the air turned colder. What began as a dream evening soon shifted into something she could never have imagined. The sky hung low in shades of gold and rose as the yacht drifted further from shore. The music played softly through the speakers, a slow tune that blended with the hum of the engine. The air carried the scent of salt, mixed with wine and perfume. Marion leaned against the railing, her blue dress swaying gently in the breeze. For a fleeting moment she closed her eyes and allowed herself to believe she was safe, that this was the beginning of something beautiful. But the water told another story. The waves had grown choppier, tapping against the hull in uneven rhythm. The sun's warmth was fading, leaving only a cool haze over the sea. Marion's reflection wavered in the darkening water, almost like it didn't want to look back at her. Darren laughed from behind, clinking glasses with his two friends. His voice was louder now, his charm louder still. He called her over, but she hesitated. Something in his tone had changed. Too familiar, too possessive. "Come here, gorgeous," he said, waving her over. "You're the guest of honor tonight." She smiled politely and joined them, though her heart wasn't in it. The conversation was playful on the surface, but there was an undercurrent she couldn't name. Jokes turned sharper. Compliments came with glances that lingered too long. The sea stretched endlessly around them, dark and open. Marion caught herself thinking, "No one can hear you out here." The thought was uninvited, but it stayed. The laughter around her no longer sounded friendly. It bounced off the water, hollow and strange. Darren had moved closer, too close. His arm rested behind her chair, his smile fixed but his eyes restless. "Having fun?" he asked, his voice smooth but lacking sincerity. Marion nodded faintly. "It's lovely," she said, forcing her lips to curve upward. "Lovely," he echoed, leaning back. "That's a word I like." His gaze drifted to her glass. "You've barely touched your drink. Are you nervous?" She shook her head quickly. "No, just not much of a drinker." He chuckled. "You don't need to be shy around me. We're friends now, aren't we?" His hand brushed hers again, this time without invitation. Marion's heart began to thump. The other two men whispered, something between themselves, laughing quietly. She stood, pretending to admire the view, needing to breathe. "It's beautiful out here," she said softly. "It is," Darren replied, stepping up beside her. "But not as beautiful as you." It should have sounded flattering. Instead, it made her stomach twist. She glanced toward the marina. It was gone now, swallowed by the horizon. Only the open sea surrounded them. She forced a calm voice. "Maybe we should start heading back soon. It's getting late." Darren looked at her, his smile thinning. "Relax, Marion. We've got all night." The laughter returned, but it no longer felt like laughter at all. The sky had turned indigo. The fairy lights strung along the yacht flickered like uncertain stars. Marion's pulse matched the sound of the waves, quick, uneven. She sat back down, wrapping her arms around herself. The men were louder now. One of them turned the music up, something fast, wild, careless. Darren poured another round of wine. "You're too quiet, Marion," he said. "Come on, dance a little." "I'm fine here," she replied softly. He tilted his head, watching her in silence. Then he smiled, not the kind that warms, but the kind that conceals. "You trust me, don't you?" Of course," she stammered. He leaned closer, his breath laced with alcohol. "Then smile. You look worried. You don't need to be." She tried, but it came out wrong. Every instinct inside her screamed to leave. She glanced toward the edge of the boat, wondering if she could call for help, but the nearest lights of land were tiny specks in the distance. Her scarf fluttered in the wind. She reached to hold it, a small human gesture against the vast, indifferent sea. Darren followed her gaze to the water. "It's peaceful, isn't it?" he said softly. "Almost too peaceful." The words chilled her. The waves were no longer calm, they were restless, slapping harder against the hull. The night had changed, and so had he. Marion stood again, her chair scraping the deck. "I think I should go back," she said, her voice trembling slightly. Darren laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Go back? We're in the middle of the bay. I didn't mean, you just what?" He stepped closer, his tone still calm but cold now, sharp as the wind slicing through the night. She backed away slowly, her fingers brushing the railing. "It's late, Darren. I think I've had enough." He raised his hands, pretending to be playful. "Don't be dramatic. You're overthinking. We're just having fun." The two men exchanged glances. One shrugged, the other smirked. Marion's throat tightened. She felt cornered, not by space but by atmosphere. The laughter, the charm, the friendliness, all of it had turned hollow. Darren poured another drink, handed it to her. "Here, one last toast. For us." He smiled thinly. "Suit yourself." Then for a brief moment he leaned in close and whispered, "You really shouldn't make people feel rejected, Marion. It's not polite." The words slid into her chest like cold steel. Her breath caught. He straightened, pretending nothing had happened. "Relax. Enjoy the night." But the tension had already settled in, thick and inescapable. As if echoing her fear, the wind began to rise. The boat rocked harder against the waves. The ferry lights swayed violently, one bulb flickering out. Marion gripped the railing, trying to steady herself. The music stopped. Darren turned off the speaker. "Too loud," he muttered, though his tone was distant, distracted. He looked out over the water, then back at her. "You wanted to meet me," he said quietly. "Now you have." His words weren't a comfort. They sounded like a verdict. One of the men muttered something about heading back. Darren ignored him. "Not yet." Marion's voice was small. "Please, Darren, I think we should return." He smiled again, that same unreadable smile. "You're trembling. Are you cold?" She nodded quickly, though that wasn't why she trembled. He stepped closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "There," he said softly. "Better." She felt trapped in that embrace, the air leaving her lungs. The water slapped louder now, rougher. The smell of salt filled her nose, mingling with the metallic scent of fear. Something deep inside told her this was no longer a misunderstanding. It was a moment that could not be undone. The moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light over the deck. Marion could see her own reflection in Darren's eyes, frightened, pleading. "Let me go inside," she whispered, "just for a minute." He didn't move. "Why? You're fine here. I just need the restroom." He stared at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "All right, but don't try anything foolish." The tone of his voice made her blood run cold. She stepped toward the cabin door, but before she reached it, one of the men blocked her way. "Ladies first?" he said mockingly. "Please," she said, voice cracking. "I just want to go home." Darren laughed quietly behind her. "You're overreacting, Marion. It's just a party." But it wasn't. She knew now. Whatever this was, it wasn't kindness anymore. She turned toward him, tears welling in her eyes. "You don't have to do this." He tilted his head, confused or pretending to be. "Do what?" Her hand gripped the railing again, her knuckles white. She looked toward the open sea, her only witness. At that moment, the waves seemed to roar louder, as if the world itself sensed what was coming. Hours later, the yacht returned to the marina. The red balloons were still tied to the dock, fluttering in the night wind. The lights from nearby boats cast shifting glows across the water. But Marion wasn't among the passengers. Witnesses later recalled seeing the yacht glide back quietly, the men laughing softly as they unloaded. No one thought much of it. People partied on boats all the time. Her phone, her scarf, her handbag, all left behind. The blue dress she'd bought for the evening would never be seen again. Darren claimed she'd decided to leave early. He said she'd taken a ride with someone else. His story changed each time he told it. But those who knew her, Nora, her daughter, her neighbors, knew Marion wouldn't vanish without a word. She was cautious, kind, predictable in her routines. Something was wrong. The sea that had carried her laughter now held only silence. Marion's daughter, Elise, was the first to notice the silence. Her mother never went more than a few hours without texting. It was their nightly ritual, a simple, "Good night, sweetheart, talk tomorrow." But that Sunday morning, the phone stayed quiet. Elise brushed it off at first. Maybe her mother had slept in, or maybe the date had gone well and she was still out with friends. Still, by afternoon, unease crept in. She called once, twice. The phone rang, then went to voicemail. By evening, panic settled in like cold rain. Elise texted again. "Mom, are you okay? Please call me." No answer. She opened their last chat. The message from Marion read, "Going to meet a friend for dinner. Don't wait up." The words now felt haunting. Elise replayed them in her mind, wondering how she hadn't asked more questions. When Marion's car wasn't found in her driveway that night, Elise called the police. Her voice shook as she spoke to the dispatcher. "My mother is missing. She went on a boat with someone she met online." The officer's tone softened, but his words were methodical. "We'll send someone to check the marina." As night fell, Elise stood by her window, phone in hand, staring at the dark street outside. She whispered into the silence, "Please come home, Mom." That was the first night she realized hope can sound like begging. By the next morning, Clearwater Bay Marina was crawling with uniformed officers. Yellow tape lined the dock where the white yacht had been moored hours earlier. The once lively pier was now a crime scene. Detective Farrow noted the details carefully. A scarf folded neatly on a seat, a wineglass half filled, and Marion's purse sitting untouched beside a small clutch of receipts. Her phone lay face down on a cushioned bench, dry, undamaged, lifeless. No sign of Marion. The yacht's owner, Darren, was present, calm and composed. He claimed they'd had a small party, and that Marion had too much to drink and fell overboard. His tone was rehearsed, every word polished. The detective frowned. "You didn't call for help." "I panicked," Darren said. "It was dark. I looked for her but couldn't find her. I came back to report it. But the problem was, no one had reported anything until Marion's daughter called." The gaps began to show immediately. Officers collected fingerprints, took photographs, and combed through the cabin. There were smudges on the railing, partial prints that didn't align with Darren's story. As the investigation deepened, the marina's air thickened with whispers. A dock worker said he saw the boat come in long after midnight. Another claimed he heard shouting, followed by something heavy hitting the water. The silence after that was unforgettable. By midday, word had spread across Clearwater. "The woman from Bumble," people murmured. "The one on the boat." Some claimed they'd seen her laughing before sunset. Others swore they heard her crying later. A waitress from the Pier Cafe told police they didn't seem like strangers. He held her hand when they walked by, but later she looked nervous. Another witness, a young man working at a nearby charter service, reported hearing raised voices from the yacht. She said something like, "I just want to go home." Then it went quiet. Farrow's notebook filled with contradictions, fragments of truth scattered like broken glass. But one fact was clear: Darren's version didn't fit the timeline. CCTV footage confirmed that the yacht didn't dock until nearly 2 a.m., long after Darren claimed Marion had fallen. He was seen alone, carrying what looked like a jacket and small bag. Marion's friends gathered outside her house that night, their faces pale and tired. Nora, her closest friend, was inconsolable. "I told her to be careful," she sobbed. "I told her." The investigation shifted from missing person to potential foul play, and beneath the steady hum of the sea, the town held its breath. Darren sat in the interview room, his posture relaxed, his charm unwavering. "It was an accident," he repeated. "She was tipsy, lost her balance, and fell. I couldn't save her." The detective leaned forward. "Then why didn't you call for help immediately?" "I panicked," Darren replied again. But the evidence disagreed. The boat's GPS logs showed erratic movement patterns long after the supposed accident. The engine had been turned on and off several times. When asked about the other men on board, Darren hesitated. "Just friends. They left earlier. I stayed behind to clean up." But fingerprints revealed otherwise. All 3 men had stayed until after midnight. None of them could be located now. Farrow studied Darren's face. His eyes gave nothing away, but his story was full of holes. Meanwhile, Elise arrived at the station. Her voice cracked as she looked at the photos, the scarf, the purse, the empty deck. "That's my mother's," she whispered. She would never leave without it. Her words carried a quiet truth no data could disprove. 2 days later, divers found her. She was discovered near the cove, a few miles from the marina. The sea had carried her gently but unkindly, cradling her one last time before letting her go. The news hit Elise like a physical blow. She stood frozen, her phone slipping from her hands as the officer spoke. The world around her blurred into soundless motion, her breath shallow, her knees weak. At the shoreline, locals placed flowers by the rocks. A small vigil formed spontaneously. Strangers who had never met Marion cried quietly for a woman who just wanted to be loved. The coroner's report confirmed what everyone feared: bruising on her wrists, markings inconsistent with an accidental fall. The sea had kept her secret for only a short while. When authorities ran Darren's background, the truth surfaced quickly. His name wasn't Darren at all. It was Leo Hartman, 46 years old, prior fraud charges, 2 restraining orders filed by women in neighboring states. Each time he had reinvented himself online. New job title, new photos, new name. Marine consultant, boat contractor, widowed, seeking connection. The pattern was clear. He preyed on trust. Investigators traced multiple dating profiles linked to the same phone number. Dozens of older women had chatted with him, some even sent money for boat repairs or marina fees. When confronted, Leo denied everything. "You can't prove I hurt her," he said. "You can't prove anything." But forensic evidence began to close in. Her fingerprints on the railing, his over them. The bruises matching his handspan. The lies collapsing one by one. Elise attended every hearing, her grief hardening into resolve. She believed in love, she said softly. He used that against her. Clearwater Bay changed after Marion's death. The marina once filled with laughter now carried a hush. Locals avoided that dock. The white yacht was towed away, its nameplate removed, its memory too heavy to bear. People began locking their hearts a little tighter. The story made local headlines, then national ones. Online date ends in tragedy. At the memorial, Elise spoke through tears. "My mother wasn't naive," she said. "She was kind. She believed there were still good people out there." Nora placed Marion's favorite flowers, lilies, near the pier. The tide washed against them gently, as if the water itself mourned. The community organized a safety workshop for women over 50, encouraging them to verify identities before meeting anyone online. From tragedy, they built caution. From pain, purpose. In the end, the investigation concluded with a single statement from the lead detective. She trusted him. He betrayed that trust. Leo was sentenced to 20 years for manslaughter. He showed no remorse, not even when Elise faced him in court. "You took her," she said, "but you'll never take her kindness from the world." A year later, Elise launched the Marion Hope Trust, an initiative helping seniors navigate online relationships safely. Its message was simple: love deserves truth, not deceit. Each year, lanterns are released into the bay, one for every victim of misplaced trust. Their soft glow drifts across the water, carrying names, prayers, and quiet hope. The narrator's voice softens. Some people hunt love, others hunt those who seek it. But love, even after heartbreak, must not die. It must be guarded, nurtured, and given wisely. Let this story be a reminder. Compassion should be cautious. If you're watching this, promise to check in on someone you love tonight. Sometimes a simple message can save a life. The courtroom was silent the day Leo Hartman faced the verdict. Reporters filled the back rows, their pens ready, but no one spoke. Elise sat in the front, her hands trembling around a small photo of her mother, smiling, hopeful, alive. When the judge entered, even the air seemed to pause. Leo stood in his suit, the same charm now useless under the weight of evidence. The prosecutor's final words hung in the air. She believed she was meeting love. Instead, she met a lie. The defense tried to plead for leniency, claiming panic, claiming accident, but the judge's tone was sharp when he spoke. "Mr. Hartman, this court finds your actions deliberate, manipulative, and cruel. You took advantage of trust, a gift you never deserved. You ended a life not through rage but through deceit, and for that, you will spend the next 20 years in confinement." Leo's expression didn't change. No apology, no tears, just emptiness. As the gavel fell, Elise exhaled for the first time in months. Justice wasn't healing, but it was something. A boundary between what had been stolen and what could still be rebuilt. Outside the courthouse, the sky opened with light rain. Reporters swarmed her, but Elise said only one sentence. "My mother taught me that love is brave. Even now, I still believe that." That was how the world heard the end of the trial, not as a story of tragedy, but of quiet strength. Months later, Elise turned her grief into purpose. She sold her mother's house, the one filled with laughter, recipes, and fading photographs, and used the money to create something new, the Marian Hope Trust. Its mission was simple yet powerful: to protect those who sought companionship in their later years. Workshops were organized to teach online safety, recognizing emotional manipulation, and the warning signs of deceit. At the first meeting, Elise stood before a small crowd of mostly women, their faces kind but wary. She said, "My mother wasn't foolish for wanting love. She was human. The mistake wasn't in her heart, it was in the hands she trusted." The trust began offering free background checks for online dating profiles and partnered with police to create awareness programs. Within months, dozens of people reached out saying the initiative had protected them. Through her mother's story, Elise saved others, turning tragedy into a shield for strangers. A year after Marian's death, Clearwater Bay glowed again, not from yacht lights but from hundreds of lanterns swaying over the water. Each one carried a name, a wish, or a prayer. At the ceremony's edge, Elise stood with Nora, holding a single lantern marked for those who trusted too easily but loved sincerely. As the first lanterns rose, soft murmurs filled the air. Widows, daughters, sons, and friends whispered stories of the people they had lost, not just to violence, but to deceit, silence, and broken promises. When Elise released her lantern, it hovered for a moment before drifting upward, golden against the Black Sea. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were no longer only of pain. They carried gratitude. Gratitude for every lesson her mother had unknowingly left behind. The bay shimmered with light that night. Some said it looked like a sea of souls finding peace. Others said it looked like forgiveness made visible. From the trial, from the sorrow, and from the ceremony, one truth emerged: it is never foolish to seek love. It is courageous. Marian's story wasn't about weakness, it was about humanity. The longing to connect, the hope that someone out there might understand you. Those are not flaws. They are what make us alive. But Elise's foundation taught one vital lesson. Trust is not a gift to be handed freely. It is something that must be earned carefully and slowly. In interviews, Elise would often say, "My mother's kindness was her strength." But kindness must walk hand in hand with caution. That became the motto of the Marian Hope Trust. Be open, be kind, but be safe. Each time someone listened to Marian's story, they weren't hearing about loss. They were learning how to protect their own hearts. The true crime narrator's tone softens as the episode nears its close. If Marian's story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story. Not for numbers, but to make sure her message reaches someone who might need it tonight. Loneliness is silent, but so is danger. One share could protect someone you love. A gentle pause follows, the kind that lets listeners breathe again after the storm. Let's make compassion careful and connection conscious. Let's build a world where trust is no longer a weapon, but a promise kept. The background fades into the sound of waves, the same water that once took Marian, now carrying her story to those still searching for light in their own darkness. The final words unfold like a quiet prayer. Love, even after betrayal, deserves a second chance, not in another's arms, but in one's own heart. To love again, you must first forgive yourself for having trusted. The narrator continues softly. Marian's story reminds us that life can break us yet still leave space for rebuilding. The sea that took her also reflected her lantern, proof that even loss can shine. A closing image forms, Elise standing at the pier as dawn breaks, the waves calm, the horizon wide and open. She whispers, "I'll keep your light safe, Mom." The camera pulls back, the town of Clearwater waking slowly, gulls gliding overhead, the world moving forward but not forgetting. Love with wisdom, trust with patience, and when you think your heart can't heal, remember, even the tide returns. The screen fades to black, replaced by a single line of text, in memory of Marian Hope, loved, remembered, and finally at peace. Story 3. Raina sat in the dim glow of her living room, her phone trembling slightly in her hands. The words on the screen blurred, not because of her vision, but because of the shock curling cold through her chest. I'm done. I'm with someone else. The text had arrived in the middle of the night, a single cold declaration, leaving no room for explanation, no apology, only the weight of betrayal. The apartment was silent, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound besides the steady ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the city lights flickered through the blinds, casting slivers of illumination across the worn rug in her favorite armchair. She sat motionless, shoulders tight, staring at the screen as though it might explain itself if she looked long enough. Her heart thudded unevenly, each beat echoing in the hollow quiet. Her hands shook. One tremor made her coffee cup rattle on the table. She wanted to put it down, to call someone, to cry out. But the voice in her head was deafening. The disbelief, the confusion, the unbearable sting of realizing the person she had trusted with her heart had taken it and left it in pieces. Her body reacted before her mind fully processed the betrayal. A cold sweat formed along her collarbone, her stomach twisted with nausea, and her chest tightened with a pressure that seemed to squeeze the very air from her lungs. Every small sound in the apartment was magnified, the creak of the floorboards, the soft hum of the street below, the distant rumble of a passing car. Raina tried to breathe, slow and controlled, but the rhythm faltered. She wrapped her arms around herself, as if her own body could shield her from the truth. Tears began to form at the edges of her eyes, threatening to spill over, but she blinked them back. She wasn't ready for the crying yet. First, she needed to understand. The thought that Tobias could betray her in this way, after everything, after she had trusted him with her heart, her savings, her hopes, it was unbearable. She had believed in him, in their love, and now the very foundation of her faith in people was crumbling. Before this night, Raina believed in love. She had always carried a quiet optimism, even after loss and disappointment. She had hoped that genuine connection existed, that someone would value her not just for her kindness, but for the depth of her heart and the strength she had quietly carried all these years. Raina had lived a life filled with love once, a marriage that spanned decades, filled with memories that still clung to her home. Even after her husband passed, she had kept their rituals alive, Sunday dinners, handwritten notes, the little gestures that reminded her of the warmth that once surrounded her. She had loved deeply and honestly, and in her solitude, she still carried hope. This night, however, would mark a stark divide, the end of innocence, the shattering of trust, and the first step toward understanding that not every heart that reaches for yours has pure intentions. Raina's life was a blend of vibrancy and quiet solitude. She had friends she cherished, a close-knit family she called weekly, and a thriving career that gave her purpose. Yet, evenings were often long and empty, and there were moments when silence filled the corners of her home like a living thing. She was cautious but hopeful, aware that loneliness could make even the wisest hearts vulnerable. She dressed with care, even when alone, tending to her small garden, reading books that transported her, and seeking connection wherever it could be found. Her eyes held warmth, but also a quiet ache, a longing for someone who could see her fully, not just her reflection in a mirror or the outline of her laughter across the phone. Raina's story, as ordinary as it seemed, carried a depth of emotion that made her choices understandable. Her heart was brave, yearning, and entirely human. As Raina sat in her apartment, staring at the betrayal that had arrived in the form of a text, one question lingered for all of us. Would we have trusted someone so deeply, so completely, that it cost us everything? This story is not just about Raina's heartbreak. It's about trust, hope, and the lessons we must carry when love turns unexpectedly. If you want to hear stories where love and deception collide, where the human heart is tested, and where resilience emerges from heartbreak, make sure to subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story. Your next favorite story is waiting, and you won't want to miss a single moment of truth, emotion, and reflection. Raina's apartment reflected her life, neat, orderly, with personal touches that spoke of a woman who valued both comfort and independence. Each shelf held memories, framed photos of friends and family, small trinkets from travels, and the occasional book marked with a half-read story. Despite the quiet elegance, there was an undercurrent of solitude, a soft emptiness that lingered in the corners of her home. After her divorce, Reina had poured herself into her career. She had risen to a position of respect in the marketing firm where she worked, earning recognition for her creativity and leadership. Her days were full, but the evenings often stretched long and quiet. There were moments when she would sit with a cup of tea, the hum of the city below her window, and feel the pang of loneliness. It wasn't that she had no friends, far from it, but there were nights when the absence of a partner's voice, the missing warmth of a hand to hold, made the apartment feel larger than it really was. She had learned to enjoy her own company, to find fulfillment in accomplishments and in small pleasures, tending to her plants, reading in the window seat, cooking a favorite meal just for herself. And yet there was a persistent, quiet yearning, a space in her heart reserved for someone she could trust completely, someone who could share both the laughter and the mundane moments of life. Reina's independence was her strength, but it also became a shield. She had loved before, deeply and honestly, yet each past heartbreak had left a mark. Every failed relationship added a layer of caution, a hesitation to fully open her heart again. Still, underneath the careful walls, there was a spark that refused to dim. She still believed in the possibility of love, not the grand, fleeting passion of movies, but the steady, tender connection that made life richer and more meaningful. Even in her solitary evenings, Reina allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to share her world with someone who truly saw her, someone who noticed the little things, like how she folded her laundry meticulously, or how she paused to watch the sunset even when no one else was looking. These moments of imagination were not merely idle daydreams. They were her heart whispering that connection, intimacy, and companionship were still possible. Her friends occasionally teased her about her cautious approach to dating. "You're too careful, Reina," they would say. But she knew that caution was born not from fear alone, but from experience, from understanding the stakes of opening one's heart. It was a careful balance. She wanted to remain hopeful without becoming reckless. And so, when she first encountered Tobias online, Reina approached him with a mix of curiosity and caution. She was intrigued, yes, but she was also mindful of the walls she had built, walls that had protected her for years. She allowed herself to take the first steps, guided by the quiet hope that perhaps, for once, she could trust her instincts, and perhaps she might find the companionship her heart had been waiting for. Even in the midst of her structured, independent life, Reina carried a quiet yearning. It was not the kind of desire shouted from rooftops, nor the fleeting flirtations of casual romance. It was a gentle, persistent pulse, a reminder that beneath her careful routines and professional accomplishments, she still longed to be truly seen. She remembered the subtle gestures of love from the past, the brush of a hand, the warmth of a shared laugh, the small acts of thoughtfulness that made ordinary days extraordinary. Those memories were bittersweet, a reminder of what she had once held and what she now missed. Yet, they also fueled a quiet hope, a belief that such tenderness could exist again. Reina's heart, despite the years and disappointments, was open to vulnerability. She craved connection not just for companionship, but for the validation of her own existence. Someone to notice the way she hummed softly while cooking, the way she lingered at her window watching the city lights, the way she poured herself into her work with quiet devotion. She wanted someone who would not only observe these moments but cherish them, and perhaps reflect them back with the same care. Her solitude had made her perceptive, attuned to the subtleties of human interaction. A look, a tone, a gentle question could awaken hope or disappointment. And though caution tempered her openness, Reina allowed herself to dream, to imagine conversations stretching into the night, laughter spilling freely, small adventures shared hand in hand. These imaginings were not naive. They were the echoes of a heart that had once loved and was willing to risk again, even cautiously. It was in this quiet space of longing that Tobias first appeared. He seemed attentive, considerate, capable of engaging her in conversation that felt both playful and meaningful. The subtle charm he displayed tapped into the yearning she had carried for years, creating an illusion that her hope could be realized. Each message, each careful compliment, felt like a spark kindling something she had almost forgotten, that feeling of being truly noticed, truly appreciated, truly desired. Raina's longing was not merely romantic, it was deeply human. It reflected the universal need to connect, to share life with someone who sees both our strengths and vulnerabilities and chooses to remain. Her heart, though cautious, whispered that opening herself again, even just a little, might lead to warmth, companionship, and joy she had once thought was lost. If you've ever sought love despite fear, leave a heart below. Have you felt the quiet pull of connection, the gentle hope that someone will notice the heart you've carried through years of solitude? After years of carefully measured routines and solitary evenings, Raina took a leap she had never imagined she would. Online dating was a world she had approached with hesitation, skepticism, and a touch of fear. The thought of exposing her heart to strangers, of navigating the blurred line between truth and pretense, made her palms sweat. Yet beneath that caution, a flicker of hope burned brightly. Her first interactions were tentative. Each message she sent was weighed, considered, and sometimes revised before hitting send. The small thrill of receiving a thoughtful reply brought both relief and a nervous flutter in her chest. It reminded her that she could still spark interest, still engage, still matter. And then came Tobias. From the beginning, he seemed different. His words were measured but warm, revealing curiosity without intruding, empathy without pressure. He asked about her favorite books, her favorite meals, the little things that made her day brighter. Tobias seemed to understand that her past had shaped her, that the careful walls she had built were not barriers to love, but shields against disappointment. Raina felt a cautious optimism. She had encountered many profiles and conversations that ended abruptly, leaving only the echo of unmet expectations. But Tobias's patience, his attentiveness, and the subtle humor threaded through his messages felt deliberate and sincere. She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was someone who could appreciate her for all that she was. Yet, even in her cautious engagement, Raina's mind lingered on what-ifs. She reminded herself of the stories she had read, the warnings friends had offered about deception and manipulation. Still, she found herself returning to Tobias's messages, drawn to the feeling that he was genuinely listening, genuinely noticing. It was a sensation she had not experienced in years, the rare and fragile sensation of being seen. Every conversation deepened her trust slightly, each interaction layering warmth onto her guarded heart. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but she recognized the pattern. Curiosity turned to care, care turned to hope. She knew she was risking disappointment, but she also recognized the greater risk of never opening her heart at all. This delicate balance of hope and caution defined Raina's first steps toward Tobias. It was not reckless, it was human. It was the quiet courage of someone who refused to let the past dictate the possibility of future love. And in that cautious engagement, the stage was set for both connection and heartbreak. Have you ever taken a careful step toward someone, hoping for love but fearing disappointment? Leave a below. Your courage might encourage someone else to open their heart wisely. As days became weeks, the messages between Raina and Tobias transformed from polite exchanges into nightly rituals. Their conversations flowed like a soft current, carrying fragments of laughter, shared memories, and small confessions that felt daring in their vulnerability. Raina began to look forward to his texts before her morning coffee, a simple ping that carried a universe of possibility. Tobias remembered details she thought were insignificant. The color of the scarf she wore in a casual photo, her preference for chamomile tea, even the book she had mentioned halfway through a conversation. Each memory he referenced deepened her sense of being seen, of being valued. Late-night video calls were rare, but his voice notes became a constant companion. The timbre of his voice, calm yet animated, lent intimacy to their growing bond. He spoke of his dreams, of a life filled with laughter and connection, and he listened to hers, validating her hopes in a way few had before. Romance, in its quietest form, began to bloom. Texts became tender nicknames, playful jokes intertwined with heartfelt admissions. Raina allowed herself the dangerous luxury of imagining a future that once felt closed off. Weekend walks in the park, cozy dinners, music playing softly in a sunlit kitchen. These daydreams were small, ephemeral, yet intoxicating. And yet, among these moments of warmth, tiny inconsistencies began to prick at her intuition. Tobias always had excuses for avoiding video calls, poor reception, a sudden project, or a camera that wasn't working properly. His job description shifted slightly from week to week, sometimes a consultant, sometimes managing a small business venture. Nothing overtly alarming, but the cracks began to form. Raina noticed them, but she brushed them aside. In her heart, she wanted to believe in the goodness she felt in his words, the attentiveness that made her feel cherished. Each red flag was countered by another act of kindness, a thoughtful message, a memory recalled with precision, a joke that made her laugh until her eyes watered. Maybe I'm just overthinking, she whispered to herself on more than one quiet evening, and so she allowed herself to continue, each step forward a delicate dance between hope and caution. It was this tension that defined their connection, tenderness intertwined with the faintest unease. Raina wanted to believe that good still existed in people, and Tobias, for all his charm, seemed to be the proof. Have you ever ignored a small warning because your heart wanted to trust someone? Share your experience below. Your insight could help someone else navigate love wisely. The day Tobias suggested meeting in person, Raina felt a whirlwind of emotions. Her heart raced, her palms tingled, and a nervous smile tugged at her lips as she prepared for the encounter. After weeks of virtual intimacy, the idea of seeing him face to face was both exhilarating and terrifying. She spent the morning carefully selecting her outfit, a soft lavender blouse paired with tailored trousers, a subtle perfume lingering in the air. Each detail mattered, the way her hair fell over her shoulders, the gentle shine of her earrings, the comforting rhythm of her heartbeat as she rehearsed greetings in the mirror. Nora, her closest friend, noticed her anxious energy. "Raina, be careful," she said, her tone a mix of concern and protectiveness. "You've opened your heart, and I know it feels right, but remember, appearances can be deceiving." Raina nodded, her smile soft. "I know, Nora, but I feel like maybe it's time to trust again. I want to see if what we share online can exist in the real world." The meeting spot was a quiet cafe nestled between city streets, far enough from prying eyes to feel private, yet public enough to offer a sense of safety. Tobias arrived a few minutes early, his posture relaxed yet attentive, scanning the entrance as if he had been picturing this moment for months. When their eyes met, Raina felt a rush of warmth, a sudden certainty that the connection she had felt through screens was tangible, alive. Tobias smiled, a careful, practiced curve of lips that mirrored the kindness in his messages, and for a moment, the world around them fell away. They spoke of small things at first, the weather, the cafe's charm, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Then, gradually, the conversation deepened. Childhood memories, hopes for the future, unspoken fears shared in tentative whispers. Each glance, each laugh, each subtle touch of hands across the table conveyed intimacy that words alone could not capture. Yet beneath the surface of excitement, a quiet unease lingered. Tobias's occasional glances toward the street, the slight hesitation when asked about his work, the way he diverted questions with charm, all subtle, almost imperceptible. Raina noticed them, but the emotional pull of trust and hope outweighed her caution. As they parted, Tobias gently took her hand, holding it just a moment longer than necessary. "I'll see you soon," he said softly. "This is just the beginning." Raina walked away, a mixture of elation and lingering apprehension. She felt seen, desired, alive, and the seed of possibility had been planted. That day she had crossed the threshold from virtual connection to real-world intimacy, unaware that the foundation she was building could be manipulated, reshaped, and ultimately shattered. Have you ever felt a connection so strong it made you ignore small doubts? Share your story below. Your experience might help someone trust their instincts in love. The first weeks of their connection were intoxicating for Raina. Texts from Tobias arrived at all hours, some playful, some tender, always perfectly timed to make her feel thought of. He curated playlists, he said, reminded him of her. Soft jazz on rainy afternoons, upbeat songs for her morning coffee. Each song, each word, carried a promise that someone was paying attention in a way she hadn't felt for years. Raina found herself confiding in him. She shared the memory of her last anniversary with her late husband, the empty echo of a house that once overflowed with laughter. She admitted the nights she felt lonely despite friends and family. Tobias listened, his replies both comforting and attentive, always framing her emotions in a light that made her feel understood, cared for, even adored. Yet beneath the charm, subtle manipulations began to weave through his words. A gentle push here, a veiled suggestion there. Tobias always framed it as concern, as care. When Raina hesitated to meet in person or questioned his odd job stories, he painted patience as a virtue. "I just want us to be safe," he would say, masking control as empathy. Raina's heart, still tender from loss, interpreted these behaviors as proof of his consideration. Every late-night call, every shared dream, every tender compliment wrapped her further in trust. She laughed more, shared her softest thoughts, imagined a future that included someone who seemed both exciting and reliable. Their messages carried intimacy, though only over screens, her first glimpse of hope for a love reborn. But small red flags emerged, persistent though subtle. Tobias never video-called. His stories about work shifted slightly from day to day. Once he spoke of visiting a client, another time of helping a friend on a project. Details never quite aligned. Raina noticed, of course, but she wanted to believe in him, wanted to believe that goodness still existed in people, and she rationalized these inconsistencies as minor quirks, harmless lies, or the complications of a busy life. In the quiet moments, she would sit with her phone in hand, rereading messages, smiling at little jokes only they shared. She felt warmth and closeness that had been absent from her life for years. And in those moments, the red flags dimmed under the weight of desire, under the fragile hope that she had finally found someone who could see her, appreciate her, and cherish her. Have you ever ignored red flags because you wanted to believe in someone's goodness? Share your story below. Your experience might help someone else stay safe. As the weeks went on, Raina's heart still swelled with hope, yet the small contradictions in Tobias's stories began to prick at the edges of her trust. One evening, he spoke about a work trip to a neighboring city, a casual mention, almost forgotten, but a few days later he said he had been at home with a client instead. Raina's mind wrestled with doubt, yet she hesitated to confront him directly. Each time she almost questioned him, his voice, calm and attentive, dissolved her suspicion. "I would never mislead you," he said, with the exact inflection and warmth that once made her feel treasured, and each time, her need for connection won over caution. The emotional intimacy between them was powerful. They shared dreams. Raina spoke of traveling again, of seeing the small coastal towns she and her late husband had loved. Tobias described visions of a life together, of small joys like cooking meals and listening to music by the window. Soft laughter over texts became a daily ritual, a private language between them. Yet something subtle began to shift. When Raina suggested a video call, Tobias found excuses. The camera wasn't working, his workspace was messy, he needed to tidy up. Every excuse was plausible, polite, and wrapped in concern. Still, the repeated avoidance gnawed at her, leaving a shadow of doubt she dared not fully acknowledge. Raina's vulnerability was evident. She shared stories of past heartbreak, moments of fear and fragility, and Tobias listened with an intensity that made her feel cherished. Each confession drew them closer. Each reply made her feel that she had found someone rare, someone who understood the complexity of her heart. Her friends noticed the glow in her demeanor. She laughed more, moved with lighter steps, and spoke with a renewed softness about the future. But the subtle inconsistencies, the small evasions, they were like faint echoes beneath the melody of their growing connection. Raina wanted to believe in the goodness, the possibility of love reborn, and so she suppressed unease. The paradox of her emotions became clear, hope and fear intertwined. She clung to tenderness, to shared moments that seemed real and full of warmth, even as the cracks in Tobias's stories hinted at an underlying danger she could not yet see. Have you ever ignored subtle warning signs because your heart wanted to believe? Share your story below. Sometimes speaking it aloud can make someone else see clearly. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. A question Raina asked herself late one night as she scrolled through their message history. Tobias had promised to meet for dinner a week earlier, yet his text that morning had hinted at a delay. "I'll make it up to you, I promise." He never offered an explanation that satisfied her, only reassurances wrapped in charm. That night, Raina sat in her dimly lit apartment, the glow of her laptop screen casting a soft light on her face. She reread his messages, the tender words that had once felt like warmth now carrying a strange weight. There was a tension she could no longer dismiss, a feeling that parts of his life remained hidden. Small contradictions continued to appear. He had once spoken of a shared friend who worked nearby, but when Raina asked to meet them in person, Tobias hesitated. A casual mention of a weekend getaway shifted each time she brought it up. Dates changed, companions changed. Each discrepancy alone seemed minor, but together they began to form a pattern that gnawed at her. Yet each time doubt crept in, Tobias's responses were meticulously soothing. "I understand why you might wonder," he typed, "but I only want honesty between us. I care too much to ever deceive you." His words, deliberate and tender, reminded her of the early weeks of their connection, when she had felt truly seen and cherished. Even with these red flags, Raina's vulnerability allowed hope to overshadow caution. She clung to the belief that goodness existed, that the man who wrote with such care and attention could not harbor deceit. Her longing for affection, her desire to be valued and understood, made it nearly impossible to fully confront the unease stirring in her heart. Friends began to notice a change in her tone when Tobias was mentioned. They gently asked if she had met him in person yet, urging caution. "It's fine to hope, Raina," one friend said, "but hope without clarity can leave you exposed." She nodded, smiling, yet inside, her optimism still outweighed her worry. Late one evening, as the city lights flickered through her apartment windows, Raina typed a long message to Tobias, her fingers hesitating over the keys. She asked about his plans for the weekend, attempting to read between the lines, seeking a hint of honesty or concealment. Within moments his reply appeared, charming, attentive, and unyieldingly reassuring. The warmth she felt was genuine enough to quiet her anxiety, even if just temporarily. In that fragile balance, the audience begins to sense the tension, the tenderness that has brought Raina hope, the subtle manipulations that set the stage for heartbreak. Her story mirrors the delicate line between trust and deception, between belief in love and the awakening to danger. Have you ever faced a situation where small doubts nagged at your heart, yet hope kept you silent? Share your experience below. Your story might help someone recognize the signs before it's too late. Raina's heart had been cautiously optimistic. After months of carefully nurturing a bond she thought genuine, she felt closer than ever to Tobias. His messages were tender, his voice notes comforting. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a future where love could be real again. Then came the request. It started small, couched in the language of hope and dreams, a promise that they could finally secure their life together. Tobias spoke of a wedding, a future, a shared home, but there was a condition. The financial contribution he asked for was significant, and yet he framed it as a gesture of commitment, a test of faith in their relationship. Raina hesitated. Her hands trembled as she read the message over and over. Each word seemed to wrap around her heart, tightening and loosening with equal measure. The excitement of finally moving forward wrestled with an instinctive unease. Still, love had always been a force she couldn't resist, and trust, once given, had a weight that overrode doubt. She transferred the funds, a staggering $93,000, with the belief that it would be a step toward happiness, toward a life she had dared to hope for. Each keystroke, each click of confirmation was an act of devotion. She felt her pulse quicken as she imagined Tobias holding the envelope of her trusts, as though the money itself carried a promise of intimacy and security. Yet, even in the moment of hope, subtle signs of manipulation surfaced. Tobias's tone shifted slightly in messages afterward, urgency in some, guilt in others. He praised her generosity, but the compliments carried an undercurrent of expectation, of control disguised as admiration. Her excitement and optimism clashed with these faint tremors of unease, creating a tension that she could not yet name. Raina's world felt fragile, poised between anticipation and apprehension. She paced her apartment, her hands pressing against the smooth surface of the kitchen counter. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant chatter from the street below, all contrasted with the storm growing quietly inside her. Her heart was full of hope, yet already shadowed by an invisible weight. Could you have seen the signs sooner? Comment your thoughts. Your perspective may help someone else recognize when trust is being tested. After transferring the money, Raina tried to immerse herself in the joy she had imagined. She decorated her small apartment with flowers she hoped Tobias would admire, lighting candles in anticipation of his visit. Every evening, she rehearsed conversations in her mind, the words of love and commitment she longed to hear. Tobias continued his affectionate messaging. "You've shown me what real love looks like," he wrote one morning. "I can't wait to make this official." His words felt like sunlight breaking through a long winter. She smiled, trembling, imagining the moment she would finally see him in person, hear him say the vows he had promised. Yet, alongside the warmth, small fissures began to appear. Tobias's stories were inconsistent. One day he spoke of a demanding work schedule. The next, he claimed to be traveling with friends. Video calls, which had once been suggested, were now postponed indefinitely. Each excuse came wrapped in charm, a smile in text or an affectionate nickname, masking the control that tightened with every interaction. Raina began rationalizing. Perhaps he was genuinely busy, genuinely considerate of her feelings. Her hope refused to see the patterns emerging in the quiet corners of her mind. Every gentle good night, my heart or thinking of you strengthened the trust she clung to. She believed she was in love, that the bond they had cultivated online was real, despite the small nagging inconsistencies. Romantic gestures deepened the illusion. Tobias sent her playlists, carefully curated songs meant to evoke nostalgia and intimacy. Each song seemed to speak directly to her heart, echoing memories of past love and the longing for connection she had carried for years. Raina would play the tracks late at night, feeling tears and laughter mingle, the melodies a bridge to a future she thought was within reach. Their conversations often lingered on dreams and vulnerabilities. Raina shared memories of past heartbreak, the quiet loneliness that followed her divorce, the moments of doubt and fear that had kept her from trusting again. Tobias listened, or so it seemed, offering comfort that felt real, making her believe that someone understood her completely. He positioned himself as the only person who could truly see her, creating a dependency that slowly became emotional glue. Despite fleeting doubts, her desire to believe in goodness overrode caution. "He is kind, he cares, he loves me," she whispered to herself nightly. Her hope had blinded her to subtle manipulation. Empathy used as leverage, affection wielded as control. Each tender word and shared secret was a thread in the web that Tobias wove, drawing her closer while masking the true intentions behind his charm. The boundaries of reality began to blur. Raina imagined a wedding, a life together, and even the house they would share. Every imagined moment strengthened her willingness to overlook small red flags. Contradictions in Tobias's narrative, postponed calls and evasions, became minor blemishes in the portrait of love she desperately wanted to exist. Have you ever ignored red flags because you wanted to believe in someone's goodness? Share your story below. Your experience might help someone else avoid heartbreak. The request came gently, almost tenderly. Tobias framed it as a necessary step toward their shared future. "Raina, I want us to begin the next chapter together properly. There are legal fees, paperwork, and arrangements for the ceremony. I can't cover it all alone," he wrote, his words precise, soft, persuasive. Raina hesitated. The sum was enormous, $93,000. It was more than she had saved for years, more than she had ever imagined spending on anyone but herself. Her pulse quickened, fingers trembling over the keyboard. She read and reread his message, imagining the ceremony he promised, the life that awaited her. Every rational warning felt distant, muffled beneath the warmth of hope. Her apartment became a stage for anticipation. She laid out her favorite dress on the sofa, the one Tobias had admired in photos, and carefully placed delicate pearl earrings beside it. She brewed tea, sat by the window, imagining him walking through the door, and rehearsed the joy she would express at finally holding the man she believed she loved. Tobias added a personal touch to his request. He sent scanned forms, small personal notes, and promises of shared memories. "I can't wait to start this journey with you," he typed. "Your generosity shows your heart. I will honor it with every ounce of care I have." Raina's mind wavered between reason and desire. A quiet voice of caution whispered from somewhere deep within, "This feels too much, too fast." But the louder, more persuasive voice of longing drowned it out. She reminded herself of the nights they spent sharing dreams, songs, and laughter. She reminded herself that she had been careful, thoughtful, and now it was time to step into the life she had been imagining. The money transferred in a series of careful steps. Each payment carried a thrill, a pulse of excitement intertwined with a tinge of fear. She felt both daring and vulnerable, her emotions wrapped around the belief that love sometimes demanded risk. The apartment hummed with expectation. She pictured the wedding, the house, the life. She pictured Tobias smiling at her, holding her hand, promising forever. But subtle doubts began to stir. A delay in his reply to her final confirmation sent a ripple of unease through her chest. "Perhaps he's busy," she rationalized. "He must be preparing something wonderful for us." The optimism in her heart refused to admit that the love she believed in might have been a carefully constructed illusion. When she finally confronted Tobias about minor inconsistencies in his documents and stories, he responded with tenderness that doubled as persuasion. "Raina, you know I would never deceive you. Everything I do is for us," he wrote. The words pressed against her resolve, softening suspicion. Her heart ached with longing to believe him, to feel safe in the future they had planned together. Late at night, she would sit in her apartment, staring at the city lights beyond the window, clutching her teacup as if it could anchor her to reality. The warmth of the mug contrasted with the icy fear curling in her stomach, the unease she refused to name aloud. She could not see that the thread connecting her to Tobias was being manipulated, spun not from affection but from calculation. This act, giving him her life savings, became a symbol of trust, of hope, of her willingness to open her heart fully again. Every thought of the ceremony, every imagined kiss, every whispered promise fortified her decision. Love, she believed, required vulnerability, and she was nothing if not vulnerable. Yet, the first seeds of betrayal were already in place. Tobias's charm, empathy, and careful attention had done their work. He had convinced Raina that trust was not only safe, but necessary. And with that trust, he had gained far more than money. He had secured her heart, her hope, and, tragically, her future. Could you have seen the signs sooner? Comment your thoughts. Your perspective may help someone else avoid heartbreak. The day began like any other, with the soft morning light spilling across Raina's apartment. She had a meeting at work, but found herself unable to focus. Her phone buzzed incessantly, each vibration a jolt of anticipation. She expected Tobias's message, filled with affection and reassurance. Instead, what appeared on the screen shattered her world. A single, devastating text. "I'm sorry, Raina, I can't do this. I'm with someone else now. She's young, everything you wished I could be for you. I hope someday you understand." Her hands went numb, the mug of tea slipping through her fingers and shattering on the floor. Warm liquid soaked into the rug, mirroring the ache that blossomed in her chest. Heart pounding, she read the words over and over, hoping that repetition would transform them into something less final, less real. But reality settled in with cold precision. Tobias had left her, and the cost was far greater than money. It wasn't only the heartbreak. A follow-up message, clinical and cruel, revealed the unthinkable. Also, you need to get tested. I wasn't honest about my health. I didn't mean for it to happen. Her breath caught. The nausea hit first, twisting her stomach, followed by a tremor that ran through her entire body. She sank to the floor, clutching her head, the city's hum outside her window growing distant and distorted. The betrayal was complete. Emotional, financial, physical. The man she had trusted with her heart had stolen her future, leaving behind fear, anger, and a profound loneliness deeper than she had ever known. Memories of their relationship surfaced sharply, cutting through the shock. The laughter of her late-night texts, the songs they had shared, the dreams she had whispered to him. Every tender moment now felt like a carefully staged act, a mask hiding a calculating intent. The apartment that once held hope now felt like a cage. Friends tried to reach her. Calls and messages blurred together, words of comfort colliding with her spiraling thoughts. How could she have been so blind? How could she have given him everything? Money, trust, love, and ended up with nothing but betrayal. She thought of the 21-year-old woman, though Tobias's identity remained mostly unknown. The younger woman represented everything he had deceived Raina for: youth, novelty, selfish, desire. Raina's hands shook as she realized the full measure of what had been stolen: her trust, her hope, and her sense of safety in the world of love. Raina's emotional and physical reactions intertwined, chest tight with grief, body trembling, vision blurred with tears. Each heartbeat felt like a hammer, a relentless reminder that love, when misused, could wound with precision. Her life savings, the $93,000 she had given him, was gone, absorbed into the carefully constructed deception of Tobias's world. But the most horrifying discovery came next: the medical report. It confirmed what her gut had begun to whisper. Tobias had knowingly infected her with HIV. The betrayal had crossed every conceivable boundary. The man who had promised companionship, intimacy, and protection had used her desire for love to manipulate, harm, and abandon her. For hours, Raina sat in silence, rocking back and forth on her sofa, the sun now a fading glow outside her window. Thoughts of revenge, despair, and justice mingled with the painful awareness that the path forward would be both difficult and isolating. Yet even in the depth of this horror, there was clarity. She understood now that Tobias's actions were not a reflection of her worth, but of his deception. The pain she felt was real, and the lessons it carried were profound. Trust must be earned, not assumed, and love without caution can become a dangerous vulnerability. Could you have seen the signs sooner? How would you have reacted if someone you trusted so completely betrayed you? Comment below. Your story could help someone protect their heart. Raina sat in the sterile, quiet room, the sharp scent of antiseptic cutting through the tension in her chest. The nurse's polite words faded into the background, replaced by the hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the rapid thump of her own heartbeat. The test results lay folded on the desk, waiting for her. When the doctor spoke, his voice calm and measured, it felt like it belonged to someone in another room, another world. Raina, the test confirms that you are HIV positive. We will discuss treatment options, but the first step is understanding your condition. Her hands trembled. The world seemed to constrict around her, the air thick with disbelief. Every breath was a struggle as nausea rose, twisting her stomach into knots. She wanted to scream, to demand that this was a mistake, that Tobias had lied, that everything could be undone. But the silence of the office answered her with nothing but truth. The reality hit with crushing weight. Her trust had been weaponized. The man she had loved, the man she had given everything to, including $93,000, had left her not only emotionally devastated but physically harmed. Memories of shared laughter, whispered dreams, and tender texts now felt like shards of glass pressed against her chest. Her doctor outlined treatment options, the medical jargon weaving in and out of her stunned awareness. She nodded mechanically, barely hearing the words. The fight ahead was not only against the virus coursing silently in her body, but against the betrayal that had shattered her life. Each medication would be a reminder, each appointment a step toward reclaiming control, yet also a symbol of what had been stolen. Once home, Raina locked the door and sank onto the couch, a blanket drawn tightly around her shoulders. She wept, not just for her diagnosis, but for the loss of innocence, the trust she had placed in Tobias, and the vibrant future she had imagined now tainted. Her cat, sensing the weight of her grief, curled against her side. Even the quiet companionship of a pet offered little comfort against the magnitude of human betrayal. If you've ever felt blindsided by someone you trusted, take a moment tonight to reach out to someone you care about. Trust is precious. Protect it, and honor those who cherish it. After the initial shock of her diagnosis, Raina knew that facing Tobias alone was not enough. The betrayal she endured was both personal and criminal. She began compiling every text, every email, every recorded conversation that had once seemed intimate and harmless. With trembling fingers, she realized that these were pieces of a puzzle, evidence of manipulation, deceit, and calculated exploitation. The local authorities initially approached her with caution, their questions methodical. Tobias's charm had extended beyond Raina. He had left a trail of victims, each cautious and hesitant to come forward. Yet, the combination of her medical records, financial transactions, and digital correspondence created a framework too strong to ignore. Investigators began piecing together Tobias's web of deception. Through the inquiry, Raina discovered that Tobias had used multiple aliases online, targeting women for financial gain and emotional control. Each story slightly altered, each persona meticulously crafted, his patterns revealed a disturbing calculation. She realized that she was one among many, yet the intimacy and trust she had extended made her experience uniquely painful. The police asked about the $93,000 she had transferred, which Tobias claimed was for wedding planning and shared future expenses. The financial trail led directly to Tobias's accounts, confirming a deliberate scheme. He had convinced her that investing in their life together was necessary, all while planning to abandon her. Raina's emotions shifted between disbelief and resolve. The sting of betrayal was fresh, but clarity began to emerge. Each document she handed over to the authorities felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Every call, every report filed, was a small victory in regaining control over a life that had been violently disrupted. Friends and family rallied, offering legal advice, emotional support, and a steady presence. Yet, Raina knew the ultimate confrontation would not come through paperwork or investigations. It would come when she faced Tobias, when the truth was laid bare. Still, the legal pursuit offered her a path forward, a way to channel her anger and grief into action. Through the investigation, Tobias's manipulations extended beyond her. Patterns of seduction, financial exploitation, and intentional deception surfaced. Authorities uncovered that his attraction to much younger partners was not simply preference but a component of his control, targeting vulnerability for personal gain. This revelation, though horrifying, fortified Raina's resolve. She was determined that justice, however slow, would be served. If you've ever witnessed someone exploit trust, remember, reporting it can protect others. Share your experiences below. Your voice could prevent someone else from being deceived. Even as the legal process moved forward, Raina confronted a solitude that no investigation could dissolve. Friends visited, offering warm meals and comforting words, but their presence only highlighted the emptiness she felt inside. Nights became the hardest, the quiet apartment a constant reminder of the life she had imagined with Tobias. Raina's mind replayed every message, every whispered promise, every seemingly tender moment that had led to the $93,000 she had given him. Each recollection carried both warmth and pain, the duality of intimacy twisted into deception. She realized that vulnerability, the very thing that had allowed her to love again, had also exposed her to deep suffering. Her body reflected her turmoil. Sleepless nights left dark circles under her eyes. Meals were skipped or eaten mechanically, the joy of taste dulled by grief. The nausea from her diagnosis sometimes merged with the emotional queasiness of betrayal, leaving her feeling as if both body and soul were under siege. Raina withdrew from social gatherings, finding casual conversation almost unbearable. Questions like, "How are you doing?" or "Have you talked to him?" became knives to her conscience. People meant well, but their inquiries reminded her of a world where trust had been shattered. She oscillated between moments of hope and waves of despair, a pendulum swinging between resilience and vulnerability. At work, she maintained composure, though colleagues noticed the subtle changes, hesitation in her laughter, a quiet melancholy in her eyes. The professional environment became both refuge and challenge. It reminded her of her independence, of a part of herself untouched by Tobias's deceit, but it could not shield her entirely from the personal pain that lingered like a shadow. Even simple pleasures, a walk in the park, a cup of tea at sunrise, carried echoes of betrayal. Raina felt the weight of her emotional isolation acutely. She realized that while friends and family could offer support, the process of healing had to begin within her own heart. Each breath, each small act of self-care became a deliberate effort to reclaim her life. Yet despite the isolation, there were small victories. Every time she called a lawyer, shared her story, or learned more about Tobias's network of deceit, Raina felt fragments of strength returning. Her vulnerability had been exploited, but it had not been annihilated. Slowly, she began to understand that emotional resilience was not about erasing pain, but about confronting it, piece by piece, with courage. If someone you love is struggling with betrayal or heartbreak, Reach out today. A small gesture could remind them they are not alone. Raina's journey began with a quiet, almost hesitant step toward help. She scheduled her first therapy session in a small office lined with books and warm light. The counselor spoke softly but firmly, guiding her through the storm of emotions she had carried alone for weeks. Every session became a mirror, reflecting both the pain of betrayal and the possibility of healing. Raina learned to articulate what she had long suppressed: shame, anger, confusion, and grief. Each acknowledgement felt like a small lifting of weight from her chest. Support groups became another anchor. Listening to others who had faced deceit and emotional manipulation reminded her that she was not alone. Sharing her story, the money, the betrayal, the diagnosis, was terrifying at first, yet each confession chipped away at the isolation that had held her captive. Empathy flowed both ways, and Raina began to understand that vulnerability could also be a source of connection. Therapy and support weren't magic. Progress was incremental. Some days she wept uncontrollably, reliving Tobias's lies. Other days she could smile at a memory without pain. These oscillations were necessary, teaching her patience with herself, an essential step toward reclaiming autonomy over her life. If you're struggling after betrayal or heartbreak, know that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Reach out today. It could be the first step to reclaiming your life. With the foundation of professional guidance, Raina began the hard work of self-empowerment. She identified the boundaries that Tobias had ignored and rebuilt the invisible lines that protected her emotional space. Financial caution, emotional honesty, and clarity in relationships became non-negotiable. Raina refused contact with individuals who raised doubts, trusting her instincts and the wisdom she had gained through pain. Each refusal, each assertion of her rights, was a small but powerful victory. Raina's self-worth grew in tangible ways. She celebrated her independence, her resilience, and her ability to love and forgive herself. The betrayal had been cruel, but it did not define her. Every decision to prioritize herself reinforced that strength. By asserting boundaries, she also began to restore faith in human connection. It was no longer about blind trust, but about measured, conscious engagement, a process that honored her pain while opening the door to healthy relationships. Remember, establishing boundaries isn't selfish, it's essential. What boundary could you set today to protect your emotional well-being? Raina returned to the hobbies that had once brought her joy, painting small canvases, tending to her balcony garden, writing letters she never sent. These simple acts were anchors, reminders that her life still held beauty independent of love or loss. Friends and family became a vital support network. They did not attempt to erase her pain, but they offered companionship, laughter, and gentle encouragement. Weekend brunches, late-night phone calls, and small celebrations became reminders that life continued beyond betrayal. Even urban walks through familiar streets offered a sense of normalcy. Watching the sunset over city rooftops, she could feel both grief and gratitude coexisting, a complex but necessary duality in healing. Every reconnection reinforced the truth that happiness is not a destination, but a series of intentional moments. Slowly, the days when sorrow dominated became interspersed with laughter, curiosity, and small triumphs. If you've faced heartbreak, what small joys help you feel alive again? Share below. Your story could inspire someone else to find hope. Though Raina's faith and love had been shaken, she did not close her heart. She allowed herself to meet others in safe, careful ways, conversations with people who respected her pace, listened without judgment, and honored her boundaries. Romantic undertones re-emerged gently, a coffee shared with laughter, a stroll where words and silences felt equally meaningful. These experiences reminded Raina that intimacy could exist without risk, and that trust, while cautious, could be rebuilt. She learned the delicate balance between hope and prudence, that love does not demand blind sacrifice, but can flourish alongside self-respect. The possibility of romance became a reward for her courage, rather than a peril waiting to strike. Even after betrayal, love can return in forms that honor who you've become. How would you cautiously open your heart again? Through journaling, quiet, reflection, and meditation, Raina developed a profound understanding of herself. She realized that the betrayal had revealed not weakness, but depth of compassion. Her capacity to love, even after being hurt, became a hallmark of resilience rather than naivety. Every setback, every moment of doubt was reframed as a lesson. Pain became a teacher, disappointment a guide, and heartbreak a mirror to her strength. She discovered that healing is rarely linear, but with each step, the distance from past trauma grows wider. Raina's reflections also sparked empathy for others navigating deception and loss. Sharing her story in small circles, she became a beacon of cautious hope, a living testament that love and betrayal can coexist, but personal strength need not be diminished. Courage isn't about avoiding pain, but facing it with honesty and compassion. Take a moment today to reflect on the strength you carry. Word count approximately 2,500. Raina's journey illustrates a fundamental truth. Vulnerability is not weakness. The desire for love, companionship, and connection is intrinsic to the human experience. Yet, trust must be earned, boundaries respected, and self-worth protected. Her story serves as both caution and inspiration. Betrayal may leave scars, but resilience and deliberate action can rebuild a life rich with joy, companionship, and hope. Romantic love is possible after trauma, but it thrives when paired with discernment and self-respect. Ending with a reflective note, Raina's experience invites the audience to internalize these lessons. Open your heart wisely, protect your well-being, and honor your capacity to love and heal. If Raina's story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story. Share this message. Someone you know might need hope tonight. The world remembered Raina for what she lost, but she chose to be remembered for what she built. Months after the dust of her betrayal settled, she sat at her kitchen table with a notebook, the same place where she had once written love letters to Tobias. The ink that once carried her affection now carried purpose. Across the top of the page she wrote 3 words that would shape her next chapter: the Raina Trust Project. The idea began as a whisper, an ache that said her story shouldn't end in silence. Raina had endured the kind of heartbreak that could have destroyed her faith in everything human. Yet, through therapy, time, and quiet resolve, she had learned that silence only protected the deceiver. Speaking, however, could protect others. She started small, a blog, a handful of posts recounting her experience. She didn't share names, only lessons. Within weeks, messages poured in from women and men who had faced similar deception. Some had lost money, others their health, and many their ability to trust again. Raina responded to every message, sometimes until dawn, offering words that once would have comforted her. That line became the heartbeat of her foundation. Through the Raina Trust Project, she envisioned free seminars, online resources, and confidential counseling for those recovering from financial and emotional manipulation. She partnered with therapists, financial advisors, and legal advocates to create a safety net for victims who thought they had none. The first event took place in a modest community hall in her city. Chairs lined the floor, soft music played, and on a projector screen glowed the words awareness, caution, compassion. Raina stood before the audience, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from power reclaimed. She told her story, not with bitterness, but with clarity. "I believed love could save me," she said softly, "but I learned that love must first protect itself." Applause filled the hall, not the kind of applause that celebrates victory, but the kind that honors survival. That evening, after the event ended, Raina and a group of volunteers gathered by the waterfront. The sun had set, and the sky held the last traces of lavender light. Dozens of paper lanterns floated beside them, each bearing handwritten words: healing, strength, awareness, hope. One by one, they lit the lanterns and released them onto the water. The soft glow drifted across the surface, each flame a symbol of someone reclaiming their power. Raina held hers a moment longer than the others. She whispered, "For the ones who trusted too soon, and for those who still dare to trust again." Then she let go. As her lantern joined the others, her reflection shimmered against the gentle ripples. For the first time in years she felt peace, not because the pain had vanished, but because it had found purpose. People around her wept quietly, some holding hands, others standing alone with heads bowed. There was no sadness in the air, only release. The kind of release that happens when grief is turned outward into compassion. The Raina Trust Project grew rapidly. Local news outlets featured her initiatives, calling her a voice for the voiceless. She trained volunteers to recognize manipulation tactics, led educational workshops on safe online relationships, and advocated for legislation to protect individuals from digital fraud and emotional exploitation. Each story that reached her reinforced her mission. Heartbreak was not the end of anyone's story. It could be the turning point. Through her advocacy, she transformed private pain into collective protection. Survivors who once felt ashamed now stood beside her as mentors, their scars becoming badges of courage. They weren't victims anymore. They were educators, leaders, guardians of truth, and Raina never forgot why it began. Every time she spoke at a conference, she glanced toward the back of the room, an empty chair that she imagined represented Tobias, not as an object of hate, but as a reminder of the lesson: evil thrives in silence, but loses power when exposed to empathy and awareness. Raina's foundation wasn't about fear. It wasn't built on bitterness or revenge. It was built on understanding. Her message was clear: we don't stop loving because we've been hurt. We learn to love wisely. She often shared her favorite reflection at the end of each seminar: pain teaches, but it also refines. Trust is precious, but it must be earned, not assumed. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over bitterness. Her story, though rooted in tragedy, became a guide for countless others navigating the fragile terrain between love and deception. 2 years after the project began, Raina stood again by the waterfront, now an annual ceremony site. Hundreds gathered with lanterns of their own. The event had grown from a small act of closure into a movement. Survivors, families, counselors, and even law enforcement attended to honor resilience and promote safety in relationships. As twilight fell, Raina took the microphone. Her voice carried over the sound of the water. "We light these lanterns not for what we've lost," she said, "but for what we've found: courage, wisdom, and the reminder that love, when guarded by truth, is still the most powerful force we possess." The audience responded with a quiet reverence. Lanterns rose into the sky, glowing like constellations born from pain and perseverance. Raina's legacy was no longer defined by betrayal. It was defined by advocacy, compassion, and education. Her story, once whispered in sorrow, became a torch lighting the path for others. Her final recorded words for her foundation's channel captured the essence of her life's transformation. Even after heartbreak, life can be meaningful, full, and beautiful. If you're watching this, please, don't close your heart. Learn, heal, and love again, but love with your eyes open. The screen faded to black and her logo, the Raina Trust Project, appeared below her voice. Awareness, caution, compassion, narrator. Raina's story reminds us that even the deepest betrayal can be transformed into purpose. That love, though fragile, can bloom again when nurtured by self-respect and wisdom. If this story moved you, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story. And tonight, check in on someone you love, because the smallest act of care can change the course of a life. Raina's journey, from the first flutter of hope to the sharp sting of betrayal, unfolded like a storm across the pages of her life. She had entered love with an open heart, believing that her trust and care would be met in equal measure. Instead, she encountered deception that would challenge her very understanding of intimacy, loyalty, and self-worth. Yet, in the wake of heartbreak, Raina did not allow the story to end in despair. She chose action over silence, healing over resentment, and awareness over naivety. Her legal pursuit against Tobias, a labyrinth of evidence, aliases, and online fraud patterns, ultimately brought him to accountability. But the real triumph was not measured in court verdicts or monetary restitution. It was measured in Raina's reclamation of her life, her voice, and her capacity to help others navigate the treacherous waters of trust and love. It had begun with something as ordinary as a message, a promise, a declaration of future togetherness. Tobias's words had seemed warm, sincere, and attentive. They had nurtured a fragile optimism within Raina, one that had survived loss and the quiet ache of solitude. She had allowed herself to dream, to imagine a life where companionship and tenderness were not distant memories but present realities. But the $93,000 she had entrusted to Tobias, a symbol of her commitment and faith, became the first evidence of the illusion. His departure for someone 20 years her junior, combined with the devastating reality of an HIV infection, transformed trust into trauma. Every heartbeat in the quiet of her apartment, Every sleepless night spent staring at the ceiling became a reminder of vulnerability and the high cost of misplaced faith. Raina's pain was tangible. She felt it in the tightening of her chest, in the cold sweat that would form during anxious moments, in the hollow ache that words could not fill. Yet even as her world seemed to fracture, she discovered the quiet, resolute voice inside her, a voice that whispered, "You will survive. You will rise." Healing was neither immediate nor simple. There were days when the betrayal felt insurmountable, when the weight of public scrutiny, legal battles, and medical uncertainty pressed down with relentless force. But Raina's determination, tempered by the support of therapy in her community, gradually reshaped her reality. She learned to set boundaries with caution and courage. She allowed herself to grieve fully, acknowledging each emotion without judgment. Slowly, she reclaimed ordinary pleasures, morning walks bathed in sunlight, evenings lost in books and music, laughter shared with friends who had remained steadfast. Each small victory became a brick in the foundation of her renewed self, evidence that even after being fractured, a soul could still reconstruct itself with intention and care. Her romantic experiences after Tobias were cautious, deliberate. She did not rush into intimacy, but allowed trust to grow slowly, rooted in authenticity and shared values rather than fantasy. These moments, tender and measured, reminded her that love, true, enduring, and respectful, was not gone from the world. It had simply been hidden behind layers of deceit, waiting for patience and discernment to uncover it. Raina's story carries a lesson for all who seek connection in a world where kindness can be exploited. Trust is precious, a fragile bridge between hearts. But it is not an obligation. It is a choice that must be earned, cultivated through consistency, transparency, and mutual respect. The courage to seek love, despite past wounds, is not reckless. It is heroic. Raina's willingness to hope, to open her heart again, exemplifies the human capacity for resilience. Yet her experience underscores the need for vigilance. Awareness is not cynicism, and discernment does not diminish the beauty of genuine affection. In balancing openness with prudence, one honors both the heart and the self. Raina's life became a testament to the strength of the human spirit. She demonstrated that betrayal, while profoundly painful, need not define the future. Pain can be transmuted into purpose, grief can be channeled into advocacy, vulnerability can coexist with wisdom. There is a quiet truth in Raina's story, one that speaks to all who have loved and lost, to all who have been betrayed, and to all who have chosen to rise again. The heart, though fragile, is not fragile enough to be broken beyond repair. Like rivers carving valleys, loss shapes the soul but also reveals its capacity for depth, clarity, and beauty. We are bound together by shared experiences of longing, joy, heartbreak, and recovery. We know the ache of trust misplaced, and yet we recognize the joy when trust is honored. Raina's journey illuminates the spectrum of human emotion, the tenderness of hope, the sting of deception, the exhilaration of reclaimed autonomy, and the profound satisfaction of using hardship to lift others. Her lantern ceremonies, her foundation, her public advocacy, all these acts are not merely responses to personal tragedy. They are universal calls to awareness, compassion, and courageous action. They remind us that the stories we live can ripple outward, touching lives in ways we cannot always foresee. Through Raina, we learn that second chances are possible, not because danger disappears, but because wisdom, self-respect, and courage allow the heart to navigate love without surrendering safety. As you sit and listen to Raina's story, reflect on your own life and relationships. Consider the ways trust is built and the ways it can be taken for granted. Look around at those you care for, friends, family, partners, and check in with them tonight. A simple message, a phone call, a shared moment of attention can reinforce bonds that protect hearts and lives. And for yourself, remember Raina's lesson. Love is worth pursuing, but always with eyes open. Awareness and empathy can coexist. Courage and caution are not opposites. Every day is an opportunity to honor both your desire for connection and your responsibility to safeguard your own well-being. Narrator. Raina's story teaches us that even when trust is broken, hope can endure. That betrayal, while painful, can lead to awareness, resilience, and the power to protect others. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to A Cozy Crime Story. And tonight, reach out to someone you love. A small act of care could make all the difference. Protect the heart you hold dear, and never forget that even after the darkest night, the possibility of light remains.